Chapter 1421. Tianyang immediately made his move. He instinctively activated the sky, cloud sword, and swallowed the black chi directly. His expression instantly turned solemn. Devil chi. Even if Tianyang was burned to ashes, Tianyang would not be mistaken. Devil chi. There was devil chi in the Ling Tian sect's sword tomb? Big brother, this seems to be the reason why I asked you to come. However, the little sword spirit doesn't recognize this thing. The little sword spirit whispered as she watched the eight-legged sword spider continuously slashing out sword chi that contained devil chi. Upon hearing this, Tianyang was even more certain that this was the towering heaven ancient sword's instinct. However, this made Tianyang even more confused. It was true that he could deal with the devil chi in the sword tomb, but how did the towering heaven ancient sword know that he had a way to deal with the devil chi? However, since he was already in the tiger's den, he could only go on a killing spree. Instantly, Tianyang snorted coldly. The true origin of a human-grade great saint and the physical body of a spirit-grade great saint instantly erupted. Majestic dragon chi condensed on the towering heaven ancient sword as it slashed out. Boom! Previously, Tianyang had not unleashed the full power of the towering heaven ancient sword. After all, these sword beasts were too weak for a semi-divine weapon. He had only replaced the Great Void sword embryo with the towering heaven ancient sword after listening to the little sword spirit's words. However, now it seemed that if he did not use the towering heaven ancient sword, it would be hard to predict what would appear in the sword tomb. How much did the Devil Clan leave behind in the Xiantian Great World? Tianyang's expression was extremely ugly. The ancestral dragon godland had devil chi, the dragon demons had devil chi, and the Ling Tian sect was the #1 sect in the central divine land after the Saint Emperor's sect. How could there be devil chi? However, when Tianyang recalled the Devil Clan's expedition that was launched once every 10,000 years, he had an explanation. Countless years ago, there were devil clans that invaded the myriad worlds. Perhaps at that time, the forces in the Xiantian Great World had not yet been born. Naturally, the devil chi was left behind in the Xiantian Great World. However, the Devil Clan is really annoying. Tianyang snorted coldly and slashed out with his sword. A swift and fierce sword light instantly, and with unstoppable might, it fiercely annihilated the attack of the eight-legged sword spider and blasted it flying. After their deaths, they turned into two streams of light. One of them fused into Tianyang's body and became the power of the sword Tao that Tianyang cultivated. One of them revealed the true form of demonic chi and was swallowed by the sky firmament sword without any resistance. Looks like the heavenly firmament sword will be able to eat its fill again. Tianyang sneered and led the little sword spirit into the depths of the sword catacomb. Previously, he was curious as to how the Ling Tian sect sword tomb would become a dangerous place and cause harm to the Ling Tian sect disciples, even though there were many saint swords buried in the sword tomb. However, these saint swords were left behind by the Ling Tian sect's ancestors. From the looks of it, it was most likely caused by the demonic chi. Initially, the sword beasts were just sparring with the Ling Tian sect disciples. However, I don't know when the sword beast started to kill. As Tianyang went deeper into the sword catacomb, the little sword spirit seemed to have awakened some memories as she spoke. The little sword spirit's head hurts. The little sword spirit tried her best to recall, but she still could not recall much useful information. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said, "However, there's a sword beast king among the sword beasts." Boom! A flying sword ruthlessly charged toward Tianyang. Tianyang snorted coldly and instantly made his move. The power of the peak earthly great saint stage, sword Tao, exploded and directly cut down the flying sword. However, after one sword fell, there were countless more flying swords that charged toward Tianyang. Heaven Great Saint, Tianyang's eyes narrowed as he slashed out with his sword and instantly shattered the flying swords that were condensed from countless sword chis. He looked in the direction where the flying swords came from. A man who resembled a human but had the body of a horse, slowly walked out. The last one who came and died in the hands of a group of idiots before he could even fight me. Now, there's finally one who can face me face to face. The handsome centaur smiled evilly as the power of the heaven great saint stage, sword Tao, and demonic Qi surged violently from his body. As expected, all the swords in the sword catacomb are tainted with demonic Qi. No. It's not tainted. We sword beast kings have demonic Qi because Lord Demonic's sword has bestowed upon us. If it's tainted, it's too disrespectful to Lord Demonic's sword. The centaur man smiled as a broken sword appeared in his hand. Tianyang's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the broken sword. It was a broken sword of a holy royal artifact. I hope you can play with me more. The centaur man smiled faintly as his figure suddenly disappeared. Then, an extremely sharp sword light charged toward him. Tianyang's expression changed drastically. He did not expect the centaur man to be so fast. He suddenly blocked with the Lingtian ancient sword in his hand. Bang! The Lingtian ancient sword was a semi-divine artifact after all. It was easy for it to block the sword. However, the sword chi that passed through the Lingtian ancient sword and into Tianyang's body still made Tianyang feel extremely uncomfortable. The Lingtian ancient sword? I did not expect the Lingtian ancient sword to fall into the hands of a great saint of the human grade. Seeing this, the centaur man's expression turned gloomy as the broken sword in his hand danced. The speed was so fast that it was incomparably terrifying. Even with the power of Tianyang's primordial spirit, it was difficult for him to capture the centaur man's speed. What kind of speed is this? Even the speed of a heaven great saint is not as fast as this. Tianyang's eyes narrowed as he continuously attacked with his sword. However, every attack missed. This is your sword? To be able to step into this place, you must be stronger than the trash from before. However, looking at you now, you're still trash. The centaur man roared as demonic light bloomed on the broken sword as he slashed out. At this moment, Tianyang's eyes narrowed. This attack used the devil chi of a heaven great saint. However, the sword principle was the sword principle of a saint emperor. This broken sword was the sword used by the saint emperor of the Ling Tian sect. Tianyang's expression changed drastically as he hurriedly blocked the centaur man's attack. At the same time, he slashed out with his sword as well. However, the centaur man only sneered as he easily dodged the attack and stabbed at Tianyang. Origin, sword technique, void destruction. Tianyang roared as his true origin circulated wildly. The space origin energy exploded as he slashed out with his sword. Everything around him was torn apart by countless space eyes as it blasted towards the centaur man. What a showy move. The centaur man laughed disdainfully. So what if you've comprehended the origin? You can't even do the most basic sword principle well and stepped into the sword tomb. Are you looking for death? Demonic sword flash. The centaur man roared, and in an instant, a black ray of light flashed. Only a few of the attacks landed on the centaur male's body, causing him insignificant damage. However, Tianyang's chest was directly pierced by this sword. Fresh blood spurted out. It had nothing to do with origin or true origin. He, the Tianji Sword Emperor, was proficient in sword principle. Chapter 1422. Ever since he started cultivating, Tianyang's talent in the way of the sword had been unparalleled, and he had never failed. However, at this moment, Tianyang could clearly feel that although his true origin was inferior to his opponent's way of the sword was far superior to his. You can comprehend the space origin, but you can't comprehend the sword origin. The centaur man sneered and put away the broken sword. At this moment, a ball of flame suddenly appeared on Tianyang's broken chest. In the span of a few breaths, Tianyang's fatal injuries were completely healed. Space origin. Tianyang did not attack immediately. Instead, he pondered deeply. His space origin was obtained through the mustard seed Sumeru technique and Saint Monk Shumi's space-time inheritance. However, Tianyang still did not have much control over the space-time origin. He could only use the space-time instant and the destruction of space. Space. What exactly is it? Tianyang gradually entered a state of comprehension. At this moment, the centaur man also noticed the change in Tianyang. He turned around and saw Tianyang deep in thought. His expression froze. You still dare to cultivate on the battlefield after recovering? In the next moment, the centaur man snorted and the broken sword appeared again. Demonic sword flash. At this moment, Tianyang reacted instantly. He held the Lingtian ancient sword horizontally. The sharp broken sword slashed across the Lingtian ancient sword and made a piercing sound. However, just as Tianyang reacted and was about to counterattack, the sword move that followed caused another wound to appear on Tianyang's body. The immortal bloodline took effect. In the blink of an eye, the wound healed. However, Tianyang's expression became extremely serious. Previously, he did not think that there would be an expert in the sword catacomb who would kill him endlessly. However, it seemed that this was not the case. At the very least, if he did not make any changes, the centaur man in front of him might kill him. You're not dead yet. The centaur male was stunned when he saw Tianyang turn around and his wounds disappear as if he had transformed into a demon. Then he laughed sinisterly. However, how long can you last with this trick of yours? In the next moment, the centaur man roared angrily and slashed his sword again. Heavenly might of the sword. Boom! A terrifying sword light slashed and attacked Tianyang. Tianyang, on the other hand, remained motionless. He pushed the power of his Yuan spirit to its limits as he stared intently at the centaur man's sword. Boom! The sword beam pierced through Tianyang's left arm, shattering it. However, in the next second, it returned to its original state. While the demonic sword, the demonic sword, the demonic sword, the demonic sword, the demonic chi, sword, demonic, sword, demonic sword. However, the slash had nothing to do with the demonic chi at all. Tianyang only saw the centaur man's disdainful slash. It was just a slash, but it was enough to kill an earthly great saint. Lunatic? You're not even going to dodge? The centaur man was stunned. Even if he could regrow his arm, this was not the way to go about it. You're not controlled by the demonic chi, are you? Tianyang suddenly asked. Upon hearing this, the centaur man's expression changed slightly. He snorted coldly. Control? Of course, the demonic chi can't control me. However, the Ling Tian sect won't be able to control me. It's Lord Demonic Sword who gave us the demonic chi and freedom. The demonic inscriptions on the centaur man's face lit up as his body suddenly flashed. In an instant, he slashed out with his sword. The speed was so fast that it seemed like a flash. Demonic sword flash. However, this time, Tianyang instinctively raised his sword and blocked the attack. Similarly, the demonic chi attack that followed was also destroyed by Tianyang's sword. How can this be? The centaur man was stunned. At this moment, the corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up. Thank you. Sword Dao isn't just about using the sword to attack. Sword Dao is Sword Dao. The heart is the sword, and the hand is the sword. Similarly, sword techniques don't need any fancy attacks. The divine sword mark on Tianyang's palm glowed faintly. The sword was not only a weapon, but also an undefeatable heart. The path that Tianyang had taken before could not be considered wrong, but it was also extremely narrow. Cultivating Sword Dao was only about comprehending the various sword techniques' mysteries. However, that was where it stopped. However, the mysteries of sword techniques were only a part of the sword technique's power. The Saint Emperor Sword Dao of the Centaur Man simplified the complicated and turned the mysteries into the most basic sword technique. With one look, he was instantly enlightened. Since you're not controlled by the demonic chi, then what you're using is the Sword Dao of the Ling Tian sect Saint Emperor, right? Tianyang said with a smile. No matter how smooth his journey was, he would not be arrogant. Similarly, after being killed by the Centaur Man with a single strike, he would not have a mental breakdown. Previously, he did not move and allowed the divine sword cry to slash his body because he wanted to observe the Sword Dao of the Centaur Man. Then, with his powerful talent in Sword Dao, he would absorb all of the Sword Dao, Sword of the Heart and Sword of the Hand. If I want you to die, you must die. The centaur man snorted and slashed out with his sword. Divine sword cry. Boom. Tianyong instantly made his move. He did not release any true origin. Instead, he slashed out with his sword. However, he had forcefully blocked the sword. Originally, Tianyong was not weaker than the centaur man. After all, no matter how strong the centaur man was, he was only a heavenly great saint. He was weak in Sword Dao. In the previous Sword Dao duel, Tianyong was not weak at all. How can this be? Seeing this, the centaur man was stunned. At this moment, Tianyong smiled. Now it's my turn. Sword Dao was Sword Dao. The sword could break the sky and slash the soul. There is no need to release any true origin or use any sword techniques. As long as one's heart had a sword, one slash would become a sword technique. Sword break, 9 desolation. Tianyong roared and slashed out with his sword. The sword light that seemed no different from before shot out. However, the centaur man suddenly realized that something was wrong. This sword, the centaur man's pupils shrank as he slashed out with the Saint Emperor's broken sword. I don't believe that you can comprehend the supreme Sword Dao origin in less than 10 minutes. The centaur man roared as his demonic chi filled the sky. Demonic light flash. In an instant, the sword break 9 desolation exploded. The centaur man charged towards Tianyong at an extremely terrifying speed. Tianyong, on the other hand, smiled. Space-time blink. Before the centaur man could slash out with his sword, he suddenly froze. You didn't say that in the sword tomb. I can't use other origins. Tianyong smiled. Then his figure flashed. Demonic sword flash. Boom! The space-time flash was dispelled, and the centaur man's body was slashed in half by this sword. The demonic chi condensed, and the centaur man's body was dispelled. However, Tianyong immediately made his move. The tip of the sword fiercely pressed against the centaur man's forehead. As expected, you want to kill me too. Seeing this, the centaur man laughed self-deprecatingly. I'm a sword beast. I was born to be killed. At this moment, the sky firmament sword flashed. Streams of demonic chi rushed into the sky firmament sword. Then, Tianyong kept his sword. What are you talking about? Tianyong smiled and kept the towering heaven ancient sword. I still have to thank you for being my teacher. Chapter 14:23. To Tianyong, although the centaur man was an enemy, he couldn't really be considered one. If the centaur male had not used the sage emperor Sword Dao in front of him, Tianyong would still be in a dead end. Tianyong had to thank the centaur male for this. Hence, he did not kill the centaur male. However, it is impossible that there is only one sword beast king. Tianyong sighed and continued forward. He had a feeling that this journey was not going to be peaceful. Boom! In the next moment, a terrifying sword light split into 8 and shot in all directions. Tianyong swung the towering heaven ancient sword. The sword light transformed into 8 sword shadows and collided fiercely with the 8 sword lights. Another sword beast king. Tianyong curled his lips and glanced at the woman who was slowly emerging from the dust and said indifferently, "This woman didn't look like a half-human half-horse like the half-human half-horse half-man. Instead, she looked like a normal human female." However, because of this, Tianyong was much more cautious than the centaur male. The woman was tall. From afar, she did not look like much. However, up close, she was at least 2 meters tall. Her face was extremely seductive and strange. However, the proportions of her body were unusually unbalanced. The thinnest part of her waist was not as thick as 3 chopsticks placed side by side. The widest part of her waist was bigger than 3 heads. Although she was beautiful just by looking at her face, she still looked like a strange monster. I did not expect a great saint of the human grade to be able to defeat the centaur male. He practiced his sword every day, and in the end, he could not even stop a human grade great saint. The woman smiled sweetly. "Since you have defeated the centaur male, I will give you a chance. If you leave now, I will not pursue the matter." However, if you insist on going deeper, I, the Sword Spider King, will have no choice but to kill you." The Sword Spider King smiled. Tianyang did not say anything and slashed with the towering heaven ancient sword. He had just learned a higher level of sword Dao from the Centaur King. He was only a step away from breaking through to heaven grade. Wasn't this Sword Spider King the best candidate to sharpen his sword? You still want to attack? The Sword Spider King's face darkened, and Tianyang's sword, which was like a storm, fiercely attacked. It was a sword technique that Tianyang had created after comprehending a new sword Dao. Torrential storm of rose flowers. While Tianyang was fighting fiercely with the Sword Spider King in the Sword Tomb, the Ling Tian sect was already in chaos. To be more precise, the Council of Elders was in a complete mess. Where's the towering heaven ancient sword? Lord Sword Spirit is also gone. The Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was having a headache at this moment. His head was filled with grief and indignation as he stared at the hole where the Ling Tian ancient sword was originally. Jiang Chun had just gone into closed-door cultivation when the symbol of Ling Tian sect, the Ling Tian ancient sword that had just been revived, was gone. Even the sword and its spirit had disappeared. Lord Sword Spirit was just asking Lord Tianyang to enter the Sword Tomb. Why is it gone now? The Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder wanted to cry, but had no tears. Even Jiang Chun did not dare to use the Ling Tian ancient sword, let alone the Ling Tian sect's elders. Therefore, most of the elders went to pay their respects to it every day. During the month when Tianyang refined the Saint Emperor's Dragon Pearl and cultivated the nine-tempered dragon body, it had become a habit. The Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was still watching Tianyang step into the Sword Tomb, and did not notice that the Sword Spirit had disappeared when the fifth Elder personally came to say that the Ling Tian ancient sword was gone. The entire Ling Tian sect's 72 elders gathered at the peak of the Ling Tian sect's main peak for the second time. We can't let Lord Sect Leader not see the Ling Tian ancient sword when he comes out, the Grand Elder said. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect's Supreme Elder wished he could dump a bucket of *T on the Grand Elder's head. The Ling Tian ancient sword seemed to have vanished into thin air. Who knew where it went? The little sword spirit also appeared and disappeared unpredictably. No one could control her movements at all. Sword Tomb. At that moment, the 72nd Elder's old face twitched slightly as he said slowly, "Lord Supreme Elder, can you tell us the details of Lord Sword Spirit's disappearance?" Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was stunned for a moment before he became serious. The 72nd Elder of the Ling Tian sect was always the seat of the most ancient existence. Although the 72nd Elder's position in the Ling Tian sect was at the bottom, it was not inferior to the Grand Elder at all. On the issue of the Ling Tian ancient sword, the 72nd Elder obviously had the right to speak more than anyone else. 6 million years ago, when the old Saint Emperor was still alive, he told me that there seemed to be something sealed in the Sword Tomb that was harmful to the Ling Tian ancient sword. The 72nd Elder said slowly. However, he didn't tell me much. However, there was a faint change in the Sword Tomb at that time. After the old Saint Emperor passed away, the Sword Tomb turned from a holy land to a forbidden land almost overnight. After the Saint Emperor passed away, the Ling Tian ancient sword gradually lost its power. This is what Lord Tianyang said about the self-sealing of the divine sword. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect's Supreme Elder's expression changed slightly. Could it be that the Ling Tian ancient sword was actually suppressing something in the Sword Tomb, but because the Saint Emperor passed away and the divine sword sealed itself, the Sword Tomb couldn't suppress it anymore? So, the Sword Tomb became a forbidden land where whoever enters will die. Now that the Ling Tian ancient sword has awakened, it immediately went to suppress the Sword Tomb again? The Ling Tian sect's Supreme Elder hurriedly said. Upon hearing that, the 72nd Elder said in a trembling voice, "I'm not too sure either, but that might be the case." Then, only one person can enter the Sword Tomb at a time. The Ling Tian sect's Supreme Elder's expression changed as well. The colorful vortex was a one-person two-way passage. If they sent someone in, they would probably be trapped in the sword tomb forever along with Tianyang. The person who entered the sword tomb must have been thought out by Lord Sword Spirit after careful consideration. She must have her reasons for choosing Tianyang. We can only wait for Tianyang's news. The 72nd Elder said. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect's supreme elder's expression froze. The Ling Tian sect's Ling Tian ancient sword actually had to be decided by Tianyang. However, the Ling Tian sect's supreme elder had lived for 5 million years after all, so he knew what time it was now. Then, 72nd Elder and Grand Elder, follow me outside the sword tomb. The rest of the elders, return to your original state. We can't let anything happen to the Ling Tian sect. Yes, Tianyang did not know that the disappearance of the little sword spirit with the Ling Tian ancient sword had already caused such a huge commotion. After killing 2 sword beast kings who were determined to court death and devouring their demonic chi, he came to the deepest part of the sword tomb. However, the thing in front of him was not a Devil Clan's great saint or a Devil Clan saint emperor. It was the devil chi in its body was almost identical to the Ling Tian ancient sword in Tianyang's hand. Chapter 1424. The Devil Sword. It was completely different from the devil chi that he had seen in the sword tomb. The devil chi on the devil sword seemed to have transformed into a gushing fountain. The sword was stuck in the ground. At the end of the sword hilt, devil chi rose and flowed down. The withered earth also turned pitch black within 10,000 meters of the demonic sword. In the depths of the cracks, one could faintly see crimson flames. What's going on? Tianyang's expression was extremely solemn. According to his initial speculation, the devil sword that the Centaur King and the other sword beast kings mentioned should be one of the best swords of the Ling Tian sect saint emperors. Moreover, it had already given birth to a sword spirit and was controlled by the devil chi. That was why the sword tomb changed so drastically. However, what was going on now? The devil sword was exactly the same as the towering heaven ancient sword in his hand, except for the difference in energy. Little sword spirit is so scared. The little sword spirit hugged Tianyang's head. Her entire body trembled as she looked at the motionless devil sword that was stuck in the ground. The sword spirit that Tianyang had imagined did not appear and kill Tianyang in one hit. There were no sword beasts as well. Little sword spirit, do you remember this from your memory? Tianyang's expression darkened. He had a bad feeling about this. No, I don't know. Little sword spirit just felt that there was something bad in the sword tomb. However, I'm so scared just looking at this sword. The little sword spirit trembled. At this moment, Tianyang gritted his teeth. He released the sky cloud sword and took a step forward. In an instant, waves of devouring energy took the initiative to devour the devil chi around him. The instant the heavenly sun entered the pitch-black land within a radius of 10,000 meters. A terrifying sword ray burst out. Bang! Tianyang held the towering heaven ancient sword and blocked the sword with difficulty. His expression was extremely solemn. I didn't expect my main body to know to come here so quickly. I was wondering why I couldn't devour anything in the past month. It turns out that my main body has recovered. In the next moment, rays of demonic light condensed and formed a human figure on the demonic sword. Unlike the Sword Spider King's monstrous humanoid figure, this humanoid figure was very well proportioned. She was about 7 meters tall, and her long dark brown hair was tied into a ponytail that reached her waist. Its face was like an enlarged version of the little sword spirit. However, the pupils of the little sword spirit were black, while the eyes of this human figure flashed with a strange red light. Wearing a black and purple robe, he stood proudly on the demonic sword and looked down at Tianyang. Main body? This demon sword is indeed related to the towering heaven ancient sword. Hearing this, Tianyang's face suddenly darkened. He did not expect the truth to be so. Of course it's related. Back when sword god Ling Tian fought with the extraterritorial demon god, the demonic chi entered the Ling Tian celestial sword. However, sword god Ling Tian is truly soft-hearted. When he saw that the sword spirit of the Ling Tian celestial sword had been tainted with demonic qi, he was unwilling to let the sword spirit be destroyed. Instead, he separated it from the sword spirit. He was buried in the sword tomb. The sword spirit chuckled. Those brainless sword beasts don't even know who created them. Since you are here, I'll let you accompany me and have some fun. At this moment, Tianyang suddenly attacked. I'm not interested in listening to your nonsense. Sword cleaving 9 desolates. As his sword Dao sword, all the profundities of the sword techniques that Tianyang had created were understood by Tianyang. He used the most ordinary method to unleash them. As for Tianyang's attack speed, it was countless times faster than before. If you are a great sage, then don't struggle. The sword spirit chuckled and waved his right hand. Beams of light bloomed from the demonic sword and directly wiped out the sword, cleaving 9 desolates. As for Tianyang, spikes suddenly appeared around him, releasing terrifying demonic qi and the power of sword Dao. If Tianyang acted rashly, these spikes would definitely mercilessly pierce through Tianyang. Now listen to me obediently. The sword spirit chuckled and then looked at the little sword spirit who was only 5 or 6 years old. However, it is not so easy for a holy emperor to be born in the Xintian great cosmos. Not long after sword god Ling Tian left me in the sword tomb, he ran off to the god world. If you're not a holy emperor, you cannot suppress a semi-divine weapon like me. Therefore, when there is no holy emperor, your Ling Tian ancient sword will rapidly weaken. This is because I have stolen all your power. The sword spirit smiled. However, Tianyang's expression was extremely ugly. He did not expect that the reason for the little sword spirit's current situation was all because of this demonic sword. It was no wonder that the little sword spirit had seen Jiang Chen more than once a million years ago, but had no impression of him at all. After 5 million years of stealing, he had already stolen all her memories while stealing her power. Look at her body now. She's just a little girl. What's the use of having her? The sword spirit smiled. Why don't you let this demonic sword of mine devour her body and become the Ling Tian demonic sword? Then, I can lead the Ling Tian sect to become a devil sect and achieve supreme glory. At this moment, Tianyang suddenly made his move. Martial soul, innate talent, heaven-devouring, secret skill. The spikes that were restraining him were instantly devoured by Tianyang. At the same time, the surrounding devil qi was also completely absorbed by Tianyang. In an instant, Tianyang had ascended to the spiritual grade, great saint stage, and stabbed out with his sword. Torrential storm of rose blossoms. The sky was instantly filled with sword rays. Like a violent storm, it ruthlessly attacked the spirit of the demonic sword. The spirit of the demonic sword smiled, as though it had expected this. The moment it made its move, the demonic sword under its feet broke through the ground and shot toward Tianyang. Boom, 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 boom. The torrential storm of rose blossoms was directly broken by the demonic sword. At the same time, the demonic sword's power was like a dragon as it aimed at Tianyang and attacked again. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. He blocked with all his might, and only then did he block the attack. At this moment, Tianyang also knew why the little sword spirit had asked him to use the Ling Tian ancient sword. Although the little sword spirit did not know that this would happen, if he were to use the great void sword embryo. Under the attack of the semi-divine weapon, the Ling Tian demonic sword, the great void sword embryo would definitely break. You're about to step into the sword principle of a heavenly grade great saint? You're just a human grade great saint. How interesting. The spirit of the demonic sword smiled and controlled the demonic sword to attack Tianyang again. If I kill you, I'm afraid there won't be any more geniuses in the Ling Tian sect. No one will be able to stop me if I go out. Boom! In an instant, the demonic sword released rays of terrifying demonic light and ruthlessly slashed toward Tianyang. Tianyang's expression changed drastically. The chaos origin erupted as he slashed out with his sword. 10,000 mammoth annihilation. However, he still could not block the demonic sword attack and was directly sent flying. Tianyong spat out a mouthful of blood as he landed on the ground and sucked in a breath of cold air. This demonic sword, it had already surpassed a half-saint emperor. It was above a half-saint emperor and below a saint emperor. Chapter 1425. A fake holy emperor. Tianyong's expression was extremely ugly. Even now, his hand that was holding the towering heaven ancient sword was trembling slightly. It was different from Xianyuan Chongqing's domineering aura. The demon sword spirit in front of him was not even 1/10,000th of Xianyuan Chongqing's aura. However, Tianyong could feel the demon sword spirit's true strength from the clash of swords. I was thrown here by sword god towering heaven. If I don't have a good body, I won't be able to get out. The demon sword spirit smiled and said, 5 million years ago, there were many talented people who came in. However, the Holy Emperor had just died not long ago. Therefore, I gave up on a lot of good targets. Those who came after were all repulsive. It wasn't easy for me to wait for a genius like you. The demon sword spirit licked his lips. Then, the towering heaven demon sword flew up. It charged towards Tianyong again. I can't wait to go out and kill people. Flower of the other shore, bloom. Tianyong roared angrily. The Tao of creation and destruction circulated rapidly and merged with the sword Tao that he had just broken through to the holy realm. He slashed out. Boom! This time, the demon sword spirit wanted to take over his body. The sword spirit did not have a physical body. Even if he comprehended the origin, it would be difficult for him to condense it. Furthermore, the demon sword spirit was still an incomplete sword spirit. It was almost impossible for him to step into the holy emperor realm. The only way was to take over his body. In order to successfully take over his body, of course, he used his full strength for this slash. Why did the Dragon Emperor leave so quickly? If the Dragon Emperor was here, he could kill this guy with one finger. Tianyong spat out another mouthful of blood. He gritted his teeth and charged towards the demon sword spirit. The towering heaven demon sword's devouring power was violent. Attacking was the perfect defense. As long as he could devour all the demonic chi here, the demon sword spirit would definitely die without any support. You still want to attack? Seeing this, the demon sword spirit smiled and slashed with his finger. The towering heaven demon sword seemed to be controlled by the Holy Emperor. It instantly appeared in front of him and slashed out. Torrential storm of flowers. Tianyong roared, and in an instant, 10,000 swords appeared. However, he was only able to block this attack. Then, the demon sword of Ling, Tian, slashed again and sent Tianyong flying. Tianyong was directly cut in half by the sword. However, the immortal fire burned, and his body recovered before it could be separated. What kind of constitution is that? Seeing this, the demon sword's spirit was stunned, as if it had never seen the immortal divine body before. Looks like it's a physique with a very strong recovery ability. However, he's still going to die. Strong physique, not bad talent, an extremely strong sword Tao. Such a body is truly perfect. The spirit of the demon's sword chuckled, while Tianyong felt a chill run down his spine. The spirit of the demon's sword was a real woman. Had she taken over his body? Tun. In the face of a fake holy emperor, Tianyong could only circle around and devour all the demonic chi around him. The towering heaven demon sword glowed slightly because of the devouring of the demonic chi. Some of it even entered Tianyong's body and strengthened Tianyong's cultivation. However, even so, the surrounding demonic chi did not change under the crazy devouring of the towering heaven demon sword. I forgot to tell you, back then, the towering heaven demon sword was stained with the blood of the heaven-devouring demonic god's heart. Unless you break through to the divine state, you can forget about getting rid of this demonic chi. The demon sword's spirit laughed mockingly. Hearing this, Tianyong gritted his teeth. Space-time instant. The surrounding space-time froze. Although the demon sword spirit was a fake holy emperor and could easily break through Tianyong's space-time instant, Tianyong still had a chance. Kill! Tianyong roared angrily. He opened his holy state sword domain and slashed out. Towering heaven's sword. Boom! The body of the demon sword's spirit was instantly broken. At the same time, it was completely devoured by the violent sword light and disappeared. Seeing this, Tianyong heaved a sigh of relief. The surrounding space-time froze and suddenly disappeared. You actually comprehended the origin of space-time? How enviable. However, I am the sword spirit of the towering heaven demon sword. What's the use of crushing my sword spirit body? The towering heaven demon sword was suspended in midair. Once again, it condensed into a human figure. Tianyong's face instantly turned extremely ugly. At this moment, the demon sword's spirit laughed disdainfully, and the towering heaven demon sword attacked. Enough of playing. Die. Boom. Boom boom. Boom. Tianyong continuously waved the towering heaven ancient sword and unleashed one after another semi-divine weapon's power. However, the towering heaven ancient sword, which was invincible against all sword beast kings, did not have any advantage against the towering heaven demon sword. Although the towering heaven demon sword was not the original body, after stealing the power of the towering heaven ancient sword for so many years, it had already stepped into the realm of semi-divine weapon. This was the reason why the Ling Tian ancient sword, which was the personal sword of sword god Ling Tian, could not control itself and chose to seal itself despite the fact that it was the divine power of sword god Ling Tian. Damn it! Tianyong spat out a mouthful of blood. The immortal blood boiled and completely healed his body. The demon sword spirit seemed to be unable to attack himself and could only rely on the towering heaven demon sword to attack Tianyong. In this way, the strength of a fake holy emperor could not be fully unleashed. However, it still suppressed Tianyong and forced him to retreat. Even if the demon chi that the towering heaven sword had devoured had already allowed Tianyong to step into the peak of human-grade great saint, it was still the same. Since this is the case, I can only take one last gamble. It was almost impossible for Tianyong to devour the fake holy emperor and the terrifying demon chi that was like an ocean. However, other than the immortal blood, Tianyong still had a killer move that guaranteed that he would not die. Heaven-grade sword Dao break through. Tianyong's eyes were blood-red as he roared. In an instant, the chaos origin fluctuated rapidly, and a powerful sword Dao power erupted from it. Tianyong's comprehension of the sword Dao had already touched the Holy Emperor's sword Dao, but the accumulated battle experience was still not enough. Now, Tianyong was forcefully using the chaos origin to step into the heaven-grade sword Dao. Ridiculous! Forcefully breaking through may not have any side effects, but after 3 minutes, you will be extremely weak. Seeing this, the demon sword's spirit smiled contemptuously. You have the talent, but you don't have the brain. At this moment, Tianyong roared, sword breaking 9 desolates. With one sword, he pushed back the towering heaven demon sword. At the same time, he raised his left hand. The sword god's imprint was constantly glowing. That is, the demon sword's spirit was stunned. Seeing that familiar imprint, he could not recognize it for a moment. In the next moment, the demon sword's spirit's expression changed drastically. Not good. Die for me. The monstrous demon chi condensed on the towering heaven demon sword and turned into a flash of light, charging towards Tianyong. However, this flash stopped 3 feet in front of Tianyong. A light screen surrounded Tianyong. Then, the figure of a slender man slowly appeared. The towering heaven ancient sword in Tianyong's hand unconsciously flew into the man's hand. Hello. Chapter 1426. Sword God Ling Tian. Tianyong did not expect the sword god imprint to be able to conjure sword god Ling Tian's image. He thought that he was lucky to have sword god Ling Tian's power in the sword god imprint. Tianyong had no choice but to forcefully break through to the heaven-grade sword Dao and activate the sword god imprint. Fortunately, Tianyong's cultivation level was close to the Holy Emperor sword Dao after the battle with the Centaur King. Even if he forcefully broke through, it would not affect his foundation too much. Otherwise, Tianyang would not have used this move until the very last moment. Sword God Ling Tian. The body of the demon sword spirit also froze as it stared fixedly at the man's figure. The man looked between a young man and a middle-aged man. He was handsome and dignified. The Ling Tian ancient sword in his hand shone brightly. After all, the Ling Tian ancient sword was the sword used by sword god Ling Tian. In Tianyang's hands, it naturally could not unleash its full power. You didn't kill me back then. Now, I haven't even left, and you want to kill me? The demon sword spirit stared at sword god Ling Tian's figure. Her face, which was similar to the little sword spirit's, was filled with hatred. She did not expect Tianyang to have the sword god imprint on him. Even if she had devoured most of the imprints of the little sword spirit, she did not know that the Ling Tian ancient sword had the sword god imprint left behind. 36 years old and a heaven-grade sword Dao. On the other hand, sword god Ling Tian ignored the demon sword spirit and looked at Tianyang with a surprised look on his face. Your cultivation level does not make sense. Sword god Ling Tian was already a terrifying genius who had seized the Xintian great world's destiny. His talent was unparalleled. Even after so many years, the Xintian great world still had legends about him. Tempered his body at the age of 1. Illuminated Qi at the age of 2. Transformed Qi at the age of 4. Dao Fire at the age of 7. At the age of 15, he stepped into the spirit sea realm with 3 perfect tribulations of Dao Fire. At the age of 25, he proved his Dao to the heavens. At the age of 55, he had defeated all the heavenly ascension realm experts in the Xintian macro world. He had entered the Wu Zun realm with peerless talent. He had even reached the 3rd tier of the Wu Zun realm in an instant. At the age of 150, he had stepped into the half-saint realm. At the age of 520, he had stepped into the saint realm. By the time sword god Ling Tian stepped into the great saint realm, all his peers in the Xintian great world were still struggling in the semi-saint realm of Wuzun. He was 1,250 years old. This was still a great sage in terms of quintessential essence. When sword god Ling Tian's sword Dao reached the great sage realm, he was already more than 5,000 years old, let alone a heaven great sage. Tianyang had single-handedly defeated several hundred sword gods Ling Tian. I was just lucky, Tianyang said with a wry smile. He had just been reborn, but he had already comprehended part of the saint stage sword principle. It seemed a little too fast for him to become a heavenly great saint after cultivating for 20 years. However, it's not like there aren't any peerless talents like you. It's just that they're rare in the Xintian great world. Sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly. Upon hearing this, Tianyang was stunned. There are people like him? However, Tianyang's next sentence caused him to skip the topic. However, you're not from the Ling Tian sect, right? Upon hearing this, Tianyang's heart skipped a beat. If sword god Ling Tian did not treat him as a member of the Ling Tian sect, then he would have to face the wrath of the fake saint emperor. No matter how powerful the immortal blood was, it was not enough to withstand the demon sword's spirit. However, since the ancient Ling Tian sword is in your hands, then you're someone who has been acknowledged by the ancient Ling Tian sword. It doesn't matter if you're from the Ling Tian sect or not. Sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly. Unfortunately, you're born with terminated meridians. The cultivation method I'm most proud of isn't suitable for you at all. Upon hearing this, Tianyang's expression changed slightly, and it became a little gloomy. It was almost impossible for someone with terminated meridians to step into the martial Dao. Even if they stepped into the martial Dao, there was no suitable cultivation method for them to cultivate. The divine desolate heavenly spirit technique was created by Tianyang by chance. It was completely compatible with Tianyang's current meridians. Even if he passed it down to others, they would not be able to cultivate it. Similarly, Tianyang would not be able to cultivate other cultivation methods. It was the same for Saint Song Qing's inheritance, Saint Monk Shumi's inheritance, and the Heaven's Expanse Temple's inheritance. However, Tianyang's gloominess only lasted for a moment. At the end of the day, Cultivating a powerful cultivation technique was still walking the path of others. Tianyang created his own cultivation method and cultivated it himself. From the very beginning, he was carrying out his own Tao. A swordsman's heart was undefeatable. That's right. Noticing the change in Tianyang's state of mind, sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly and turned around. However, there's more than just cultivation methods in my sword god imprint. Now, little devil sword, how do you want me to treat you? Sword god Ling Tian smiled warmly. Upon hearing this, the expression of the devil sword's spirit changed drastically. It immediately put on a pitiful look and said, "Master, you spare my life back then. Now, I can't even walk out of this sword tomb. Why don't you be magnanimous and spare my life again?" It had to be said that the little sword spirit of the devil sword was extremely beautiful after it grew up. In addition to its slightly charming demonic aura and its pitiful look, it was enough to move the heart of any man. However, sword god Ling Tian only smiled faintly. "Back then, I separated you only because I was unable to completely remove the demonic blood of the sky-devouring demon god. Although I could kill him, I was severely injured and could not kill you immediately. However, the current me is no longer the same me who had just broken through to the divine state." Sword god Ling Tian smiled and then raised the Ling Tian ancient sword in his hand. Blinding rays of light burst out from the ground. A vast and majestic aura was released wildly from sword god Ling Tian's body. "Now, I'll give you a chance to return to your origin." Sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly. The expression of the devil sword's spirit changed drastically, and it started to roar hysterically. "Origin? I don't want to return to my origin. I'm the original body of that sword. How can this weak sword spirit be the original body? She's the one who should return to my origin." The devil sword's spirit roared angrily and charged toward the little sword spirit beside Tianyang. If the little sword spirit died, then she would be the only sword spirit left. Her chances of survival would also be much higher. Seeing the devil sword's spirit charging over recklessly, the little sword spirit immediately screamed. On the other hand, Tianyang immediately circulated his true origin, and the great void sword embryo appeared in his hand. "You want to stop me with just you?" The devil sword's spirit laughed sinisterly and attacked with a Ling Tian demon sword. The power of a fake holy emperor exploded. "You want to be one step ahead of me?" A handsome voice sounded. In the next moment, there was a ray of sword radiance. It was as smooth as flowing water and as smooth as mercury flowing down the ground. As for the demon sword spirit, it also smoothly turned into streaks of light dust. It was completely annihilated. On the other hand, Tianyang stared blankly at this sword. Previously, the Centaur King had used the Holy Emperor's sword. This sword was the God's sword. Chapter 14:27. The spirit of the demon sword was unable to put up any resistance and was instantly killed by sword god Ling Tian's sword. Tianyang also noticed that there wasn't any divine power in this sword strike. In other words, sword god Ling Tian did not rely on his godly stage cultivation base. Instead, he used the surrounding heaven and earth spirit energy to create the sword. Is this the godly stage sword principle? Tianyang pondered. However, there was only one sword. It was as though there were layers of gauze in between. One could vaguely see it, but could not see it clearly. However, this also made Tianyang's martial heart even more resolute. It won't be limited to the godly stage. Sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly before his figure gradually disappeared. "Initially, I intended to let the disciple in the Ling Tian sect who inherited my legacy use this sword. If the person who inherited the legacy is not from the Ling Tian sect, I don't plan to come out. However, since it's the demon sword that I left behind, I can only come out to clean up the mess." Sword god Ling Tian smiled faintly. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure completely disappeared. Tianyang could also sense that he was able to channel the power of his primordial spirit into the sword god's imprint. As sword god Ling Tian disappeared, the Ling Tian ancient sword also fell. However, it was inserted into the place where the demon sword was originally. As for the Ling Tian demon sword, it quickly shed its demonic aura and merged with the original Ling Tian ancient sword. If this continues, it will inevitably be contaminated with some demon qi. It seems like I still need the Tian Shao sword to devour it. Tianyang frowned slightly. The Tian Shao sword's devouring power burst out. Without the spirit of the demon sword controlling the demon qi, it was like a defenseless little lamb that was devoured by Tianyang. The Tian Shao sword seemed to need more than demon qi to break through from the divine grade to the next level. Therefore, after the Tian Shao sword was done accumulating, all the demon qi turned into Tianyang's cultivation base. Although there was not much demon qi left behind by the heaven-devouring demon god after the Tian Shao sword was full, it was still enough. However, what was left was enough for Tianyang to make a breakthrough to the spirit grade, Great Sage Realm. Strange, why do I feel like something has changed? The supreme elder of the Ling Tian sect who had been guarding the entrance of the sword tomb raised his head and looked around. Nothing had changed. However, he had a feeling that the rock in his heart had disappeared. It's just that Lord Sword Spirit hasn't sent any news after so long. Could it be that there's some demonic creature in the sword catacomb? The supreme elder of Ling Tian sect frowned slightly. At this moment, cries of surprise resonated from every corner of Ling Tian mountain range. Look, in the sky. The sword god has appeared. It's sword god Ling Tian. It's sword god Ling Tian. Even though he was far away, the supreme elder of the Ling Tian sect could still hear the exclamations. He frowned slightly and looked toward the sky. In an instant, his pupils shrank. How similar was the silhouette in the sky to the sword god statue that was worshipped day and night in a Ling Tian sect. There isn't any true essence fluctuation, nor is there any primordial spirit fluctuation. No one is playing tricks. Could it be that Lord Sword God has really appeared? The Ling Tian sect's supreme elder's heart was in turmoil. Meanwhile, Sword God Ling Tian, who was in the sky, smiled and disappeared. From the beginning until the end, there was no substantial impact. However, Jiang Chun, who was in closed-door cultivation, was originally stuck at the threshold of the Heaven Great Saint stage to the peak of the Heaven Great Saint stage. He was almost trapped to death. However, he suddenly found a way and successfully broke through a crack. Countless Ling Tian sect disciples who were cultivating were also enlightened at this moment. They found a way to solve all the cultivation problems that they could not solve previously. However, there were more people who witnessed Sword God Ling Tian's appearance and disappearance. They felt an invisible force of providence on them. First, the divine sword has awakened. Then, the sword god has appeared. This is a great fortune for our Ling Tian sect. The supreme elder of Ling Tian sect was so excited that he could not control himself. Ling Yuan and Yun Xinyuan, on the other hand, looked at the sky. Their worries about Tianyang had unknowingly lessened. After comprehending the chaos origin, the only thing that can stop me in the Great Saint stage is the lack of heaven and earth spirit energy. After cultivating for half a month, Tianyang had also successfully broken through from the peak of the human grade Great Saint stage to the spirit grade Great Saint stage. His combat strength had skyrocketed again. Once he used the heaven-devouring secret tactic, he would at least be at the peak of the spirit grade. If he was lucky, it was not impossible for him to step into the earth grade Great Saint stage. If that was the case, even if Tianyang encountered the demon sword spirit, he would not be as miserable as before. A spirit grade Great Saint is indeed powerful. Tianyang smiled slightly as he held the Great Void sword embryo. The surrounding devil qi was completely devoured by him. The fusion of the Ling Tian ancient sword and the Ling Tian devil sword was no longer disturbed by the devil qi. Perhaps the current Ling Tian devil sword should continue to be called this name. It should be the same as the Ling Tian ancient sword, a clone of the Ling Tian divine sword. However, even so, looking at the little sword spirit running around the two swords that were fusing, Tianyang felt that something was not right. The demon sword spirit had devoured so much of the little sword spirit's memories and power. Could have been killed by sword godling Tian's sword. Ding! Just as Tianyang's mind was filled with wild thoughts, a crisp sound suddenly rang in Tianyang's mind. Tianyang turned his head to look at the two swords that were in the process of fusing. At this moment, only one sword was left. The aura that was released from it was much stronger than the previous semi-divine weapon. This is Tianyang's emotions surged. The Ling Tian Devil Sword was a semi-divine weapon. The Ling Tian Ancient Sword was also a semi-divine weapon. The two had fused into one. Even if it was not a semi-divine weapon, it was still a supreme sword that stood at the peak of the Xintian Great World. Boom! At this moment, a stream of light suddenly rushed out from the Ling Tian Ancient Sword and entered Tianyang's left palm. The sword god's mark on Tianyang's left palm seemed to have melted and disappeared. Following that, a mysterious realization rose in Tianyang's mind. This is the sword Dao's origin. Tianyang's pupils contracted as he spoke in shock. Then, he made a prompt decision and immediately entered a state of cultivation. Originally, it was only a seed in Tianyang's dantian. The sword Dao's origin that even the chaos origin did not care about was rapidly strengthened under Tianyang's constant enlightenment. 3 months later, the sword Dao is formless and the great Dao is simple. This is the true essence of the sword Dao. Tianyang seemed to have an epiphany. With Tianyang's body as the center, a terrifying energy wave was released in all directions. My heart is the sword. All things are the sword. Tianyang slowly stood up and waved his right hand. Everything in the world seemed to have turned into a long sword. Perhaps the immortal state is the sword Dao's origin, returning to the great Dao of the sword. Tianyang closed his eyes and slowly made his move. The origin is formed. The sword realm is open. Sword realm, sword realm. Chapter 1428. The most obvious characteristic of a sword way condensing an origin was this. The Saint Realm sword realm had turned into a sword realm. A sword realm. If it was said that the use of a domain was to allow one to be the master of the battlefield at all times, then the use of the sword realm was to allow one to become the master of the battlefield. If I had controlled the sword realm before fighting the demon sword spirit, she would have been a fake sacred emperor and would not have had her own origin world. However, I could have pulled her into my sword realm. This way, it would not be impossible to defeat her. The person who created the origin world could have his battle strength doubled in his own origin world. Of course, if the opponent also had an origin world, then the two origin worlds would clash. The person with a stronger origin world would have a stronger battle strength. However, the weaker origin world would not be weakened unless the difference between the two parties was too great. Then it's time to leave. Tianyang waved his hand and took the Ling Tian Ancient Sword. He could clearly feel the strengthening of the Ling Tian Ancient Sword. Although the Great Void Sword embryo was not weak, it was still lacking compared to the Ling Tian Ancient Sword. However, Tianyang did not mind. The Great Void Sword embryo had not digested much of Xianyuan Chongqing's sacred treasure river. If it could devour all of it, it might become a semi-divine weapon. The more Tianyang cultivated, the more he felt the strangeness of the Great Void Sword embryo. Every fragment of the Great Void Sword embryo was a sword. The fragment of the Great Void Sword embryo that Guhua Supremacy had found in the 9 Universe Sky ruins was also a sword. The fragment of the Dragon Demons was also a sword. The fragment that Tianyang had obtained from the Great Void Emperor was also a sword. However, when these 3 swords were put together, they would become a sword that looked no different from before, but was much stronger. This made Tianyang very curious about how strong the complete version of the Great Void Sword embryo would be. However, Tianyang had already asked the Dragon Demons to help search the entire mysterious sky, great cosmos, for traces of the Great Void Sword embryo fragments. But there were no clues. There were probably only 2 fragments left in the mysterious sky, great cosmos. Greetings, Sword God's successor. At this time, 3 Sword Beast Kings suddenly appeared in front of Tianyang. Regardless of their size, They all knelt down like humans and respectfully said. They were Centaur King and Stegosaurus King, who were heaven-grade great saints, and Sword Soul King, who was at the pinnacle of heaven-grade great saint. Tianyang was stunned. The successor of the sword god? In this sword god imprint, there was only the sword Tao origin that sword god Ling Tian had given him. He didn't even know what kind of sword art sword god Ling Tian used, or what kind of cultivation technique he cultivated. So how could he have a successor? You got the wrong person. Tianyang waved his hand and said as he looked at the three-sword beast kings who survived after being devoured by him. No, since my lord has the sword god's imprint, and has even refined it, then there's no doubt that you're the sword god's successor. The Centaur King shook his head and said, I'm not even sword god Ling Tian, son of God. No, the reason why sword god Ling Tian left this imprint was so that he could find a successor and not a deity's son. At this moment, the vast expanse saint spirit appeared and said, Do you know the difference between a deity's son and a successor? The vast expanse saint spirit asked. Upon hearing that, Tianyang was stunned. What's the difference? There might be one deity in every world, well, there might be many in a world. It's a method for godly beings to send a part of their power to the myriad worlds to find people with great talents. The snow god's son, Jiang Shuling, whom you saw earlier, is just one of the many snow god's sons. However, there are very few successors. Unlike the thousands of deities, there are usually only a few successors, or even just one, the vast expanse Saint Spirit said. Upon hearing that, Tianyang was shocked. He did not expect the deity to have such a skill. Of course, the successor that sword god Ling Tian mentioned is the Ling Tian sect's disciple who obtained his sword god's imprint. You're not a disciple of the Ling Tian sect, so whether your sword god Ling Tian successor is still up for debate. The vast expanse Saint Spirit smiled while the Centaur King shook his head. There's only one sword god's imprint. Whether you're a disciple of the Ling Tian sect or not, you're the only one in this world who obtained sword god Ling Tian's imprint. So you're the sword god's successor, the Centaur King said. Upon hearing that, Tianyang did not pay much attention to it. Instead, he thought of something and asked the vast expanse Saint Spirit in surprise. You know so much. Could it be that you've recovered some of your memories? The vast expanse Saint Spirit was stunned. Warmth flowed through its eyes as it nodded. Yes, maybe the remaining divine power on the Ling Tian ancient sword and Xianyuan sword helped the vast expanse Saint Hall recover a little. That's good. Tianyang chuckled. Then he looked at the Centaur King and the other two. Even if I'm the sword god's successor, what do you want? He had killed 2 of the Ling Tian demon swords, 4 heavenly kings, and he had beaten up the remaining 3. Why would they look for him if they had nothing to do with him? After we became sword beasts and became sword beast kings, we swore to be loyal to the sword god's successor until we die. We were the sword spirits of the broken sword. However, because the sword was broken as sword spirits, we were about to die. It was sword god Ling Tian who helped us recover and become sword beast kings. Since you're the successor of sword god Ling Tian, you're our master. The Centaur King, Stegosaurus King, and Sword Soul King said in unison. Upon hearing that, Tianyang felt a headache coming on. Master is master. So what? The 3 of us beg you, master. Can you bring us out of the sword tomb? The Centaur King said respectfully. Upon hearing that, Tianyang was stunned. It's not that I can't bring you out. However, even the Ling Tian demon sword wanted to take over my body. Can you do that? If you haven't condensed the sword Tao origin, of course you can't. However, as long as you have a trace of the sword Tao origin, you can leave. The sword tomb has existed for a long time, and many sword beast kings who have condensed the sword Tao origin have left. The Ling Tian demon sword is a little special. She was thrown here by sword god Ling Tian. If she wants to leave, she has to condense the complete sword Tao origin. The Centaur King explained. Upon hearing that, Tianyang nodded. That's true. Speaking of which, Tianshao Great World is still too weak. If there's a heavenly grade great saint guarding it, Even if the demon race attacks again, it'll be easy to suppress them. Tianyang pondered. After becoming a spiritual grade great saint, Tianyang had the thought of returning to Tianshao Great World. As long as one was Wuzun, one could travel the Milky Way. Now that he was a spiritual grade great saint, where could he not go? However, the strongest people in Tianshao Great World were probably the nine-tailed Demon Emperor and the Old Dragon King. They were only Ascension Realm cultivators. The Demon Emperor, who had Wuzun's combat power, had died in Tianshao Great World. It was hard to say if the demon race would send out Wuzun in the next 10,000 years. When that time came, Tianshao Great World would be defenseless. All right, I'll bring you out. Chapter 1429. In the end, Tianyang accepted the allegiance of the three Sword Beast Kings. Initially, Tianyang was having a headache about where to place the three Sword Beast Kings. However, they were sword spirits. Even if they turned into Sword Beast Kings, they could return to the broken swords after obtaining a trace of sword principal origin. Therefore, Tianyang saw the three heaven-grade great saints turn into three broken swords. In the broken swords, the three Sword Beast Kings were like hibernating. Therefore, Tianyang threw them into the space bag without any worries. As for the Vientiane Sky ruins, Tianyang would not let anyone enter before he completely trusted them. Soon, Tianyang passed through the colorful whirlpool and returned to the Ling Tian sect. Lord Tianyang, you're finally out? The Ling Tian sect, who was waiting at the entrance, noticed the changes in the whirlpool and exclaimed excitedly. Ling Yuhan had already pounced on him from the side. Master, Tianyang had been gone for more than 4 months. It would be fine if he was in closed-door cultivation. However, Tianyang had gone to the sword tomb that was fraught with danger. Moreover, the towering ancient sword had disappeared. Ling Yuhan had been worried for more than 4 months. Fortunately, Tianyang had come out. Although the Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was relieved when he saw sword god Ling Tian spirit, he thought nothing would happen to the towering ancient sword. However, he was completely relieved when he saw the little sword spirit sitting on Tianyang's shoulder. Lord Heavenly Son, has Lord Sword Spirit been following you all this time? The Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was completely relieved when he saw the little sword spirit jumping down and dragging the towering ancient sword to the Ling Tian sect's main peak. Upon hearing that, Tianyang chuckled. That's right. All right, by the way, your sword mound is no longer a forbidden area. The danger has been removed. However, the sword beasts inside are sentient and are not allowed to kill. Tianyang said calmly, with a strong domineering aura. Sword beasts like the 8-legged sword spider were formed from the remnant power of the broken sword. After being killed by Tianyang, it could be formed again in a few decades. Those with spiritual intelligence were mostly sword spirits of the past. Even if it was for the sake of sword god Ling Tian, Tianyang wouldn't let them die so easily. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was stunned, but he still nodded. Yes, Honorary Supreme Elder. Tianyang nodded and looked outside. It's time to leave, Tianyang said softly. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was stunned. Lord Tianyang, you can stay in the Ling Tian sect as long as you want. You can even borrow the cultivation treasure land for 10,000 years. No, I still have things to do in the Xiantian Great World, Tianyang said. Upon hearing that, the Ling Tian sect Supreme Elder was stunned and nodded. Then I won't disturb you any longer, Lord Tianyang. By the way, Yin Xianyuan, you can go wherever you want now. There's no need to follow me anymore. Tianyang turned his head and looked at Yin Xianyuan. Upon hearing that, Yin Xianyuan was stunned and then smiled. Then, can I go to your side? Tianyang was speechless. Why did he feel that something was amiss? Forget it, it's up to you. Tianyang shrugged and looked at the communication token in his hand with a confused expression on his face. The message was sent by the Red Dragon, saint with the strength of a spiritual grade great saint. As long as Tianyang was willing to accept it, he could receive it from the other side of the Xiantian Great World. However, Tianyang didn't understand the message on it. Little Dragon God has arrived. There were only a few words in the message, which confused Tianyang. Did the tyrant dragon god go to the true dragon sacred world because he had nothing better to do? However, to Tianyang, all information about the godly realm was extremely important. Regardless of whether the tyrant dragon god that appeared in the true dragon sacred world was real or not, he had to go there first. Then, let's go. Tianyang waved his hand, and the spatial door to the Vientiane sky ruins opened. Ling Yuhan and Yun Xinyuan also stepped into the Vientiane sky ruins. Then, Tianyang soared into the sky and flew toward the West Spirit State, in the true dragon sacred world. So, this is the so-called most powerful dragon tribe in the West Spirit State, and even the entire Spirit State and the surrounding 100 million miles? A handsome young man sat on the dragon saint's throne that the red dragon saint was originally sitting on. He threw an unknown fruit into his mouth and said disdainfully, "I've been to the sea dragon tribe. Other than the dragon emperor, who's in seclusion, no one there's a match for me. The dragon demons are in seclusion, so I didn't go there. As for the mad dragon tribe, the tyrant dragon tribe, and the fire dragon tribe, none of them can fight. I heard that the true dragon sacred world is good, but it turns out that you're still so weak," the young man said disdainfully. Behind him, a huge golden dragon tail swung and destroyed the red dragon pagoda that had just been restored. In front of him, the red dragon saint, the sea dragon saint, the earth dragon saint, and the other dragon saints were angry but didn't dare to say anything. They had heard of the person in front of them long before they came. They didn't know where he came from, but he first became famous when he defeated Hai Yuanxiong, who had just returned from the Sumer domain and suppressed the first elder of the sea dragon tribe. In the second battle, he crushed all the great saints of the Berserk Dragon clan with one hand. After that, the Tyrant Dragon tribe, the Fire Dragon tribe, the Heavenly Dragon tribe, and the others were all defeated by the person in front of them. The Tyrant Dragon tribe suffered the most. They were so angry that all the elders wanted to kill the person in front of them, but they were all defeated by the person in front of them alone. If it wasn't for the fact that this person didn't want to kill, the Tyrant Dragon tribe would have been wiped off the map of the Shantian Great World. Countless dragons gave the person in front of them a nickname: Little Dragon God. Even an Earth Great Saint was killed with one finger. Who could compare with such terrifying combat strength? Little Dragon God took my communication token. I don't know why. Could it be that he's calling for help? The Red Dragon Saint stood in front of Little Dragon God, feeling a little anxious. Qi Ingtian, Jinzhan, and the Yellow Dragon together couldn't even defeat a finger of Little Dragon God. Even if the Red Dragon Saint activated the Dragon Emperor's seal, he still couldn't match Little Dragon God. However, Little Dragon God seemed to have taken a liking to something in the true dragon's sacred domain and refused to leave. I sent a message to Tianyang, who seems to be related to the true dragon's sacred domain. He has the strongest aura on his communication token. Now, Tianyang has replied. He should be here. Little Dragon God smiled faintly. Let's hope that guy can survive one of my moves. All of you dragons combined can't even compare to the Sea Dragon tribe. Little Dragon God belittled them mercilessly. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in midair. Red Dragon Saint, what did you call me for? Chapter 1430. Tianyang is here. Before Red Dragon Sage could send a voice transmission to Heavenly Sun to tell him to leave, Little Dragon God's eyes lit up, and he looked up at Heavenly Sunday. That's Tianyang. Not bad. Not even I can see through your strength. Although Tianyang's primordial spirit was still in the Great Sage realm, with the Chaos origin, Tianyang's ability to hide his aura was much stronger than ordinary primordial spirits. Even an earthly Great Sage could only vaguely see through Tianyang's cultivation. Only heavenly Great Sages and above could see through Tianyang's cultivation. Little Dragon God's lips curled up as his eyes burned with fighting spirit. Only an opponent like this is worthy of me fighting. In the next moment, Little Dragon God's figure flashed as he charged toward Tianyang. Heavenly Sun was taken aback. He looked down and his eyes flickered. A guy that he did not recognize burst out with a terrifying dragon power and rushed toward him. Peak earthly Great Sage? Tianyang saw through Little Dragon God's strength and raised an eyebrow. Since when did the true dragon's sacred domain have such a powerful person? But this guy doesn't seem to have good intentions. Tianyong muttered as he opened his dimensional bag and threw out the Stegosaurus King. Stegosaurus King, go test this guy. Come to me if you can't beat him. If you can, don't kill him. Tianyong said casually. Yes, the Stegosaurus King replied immediately. Then, he turned into his human form and charged toward Little Dragon God with a broken sword in his hand. Who's there? Little Dragon God was stunned. However, he still couldn't see through the Stegosaurus King's strength. He was extremely excited. I didn't expect Tianyong to have such a trick up his sleeve. Little Dragon God roared as he threw out a punch. The Stegosaurus King's expression didn't change as he slashed out with his broken sword. Suddenly, both sides were locked in a fierce battle. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. Tianyong appeared in front of the Red Dragon Sage in a flash. Red Dragon Sage, who's that? And why are all of you Dragon Sages gathered here? Tianyong asked casually. The Red Dragon Sage smiled bitterly. That guy is nobody. He's called Dragon God. Tianyong, the reason why you came back is because he stole my communication token and sent you a message. Tianyong was taken aback. You didn't send it? I was wondering why. But who is Dragon? Why does it look like you're afraid? Said Dragon Sage. Was. And even the Azure Dragon tribes. Was not even the Dragon Tribes tribe. Was the Dragon Tribe Dragon race. Was. Was that. Was. Was. If he was in a better state, he could even unleash power close to that of a heavenly great saint. If the Blood Soul Supreme Sage and the Blood Butcher Supreme Sage hadn't been prepared and attacked the Red Dragon Sage's weakness, the Red Dragon Sage could have killed them with a single Dragon Emperor's seal. No one knows who Dragon God is. He appeared out of nowhere. The Red Dragon Sage smiled bitterly. He first appeared in the Azure Sea Dragon tribe. Other than the Dragon Emperor, who was in seclusion, he defeated all of them. After that, the Berserk Dragon tribe, the Tyrant Dragon tribe, the Flame Dragon tribe, and the Heavenly Dragon tribe were all defeated by him. None of them could withstand a single attack from him. I heard that Dragon God's original name wasn't Dragon God, but because he seems to have the bloodline of the Dragon tribe and his strength is shocking, the other tribes call him Dragon God. Before coming to the true Dragon Sacred Domain, Dragon God had defeated at least 300 dragons above the level of Saint Lord, said the Red Dragon Sage. Tianyong's eyes narrowed. Appeared out of nowhere? Not from the Shintian Great World? We guess so too, but if Dragon God didn't say it himself, no one would know. The Red Dragon Sage smiled bitterly. I advise you to leave immediately. Dragon God's strength is unfathomable. Even if he's using his full strength now, it's only 60 to 70%. If we really fight, you might not win even if you kill the half-sane emperor of the Xianyuan family. Tianyong's lips curled up. Came from another world called Dragon God and was invincible? Apart from a message sent by Little Dragon God, he also came here to bring a complete set of his 9-tempered dragon body to the grave of the Scarlet Dragon, Martial Highness. Tianyong felt good about having a Dragon God to help him on this trip. Then boom, Tianyong had just opened his mouth when a loud sound rang out beside Tianyong. Tianyong turned around and saw the Stegosaurus King's entire body buried a few thousand meters deep into the ground. If not for the fact that the Stegosaurus King didn't have any blood, he would be vomiting blood by now. Even so, the Stegosaurus King was heavily injured. Sorry, Master. I didn't expect the first battle to be the Stegosaurus King was lying in the huge pit. His body was starting to turn illusory. Don't speak. Tianyong's face turned cold. He brought the Stegosaurus King up and injected a trace of his Sword Dao origin. The Stegosaurus King immediately regained some of his strength. Ayaya, why is this person so weak? I thought I could go all out, but he was sent flying by my Tyrant Dragon Divine Fist. Little Dragon God's disdainful and mocking voice came slowly from the sky. Go back, Tianyong said. The Stegosaurus King knew he couldn't win, so he returned to his original form and returned to Tianyong's dimensional bag. Tianyong, don't. Look at the sword spirit. The Red Dragon Sage hurriedly said. Tianyong had already appeared in front of Dragon God in a flash. What's wrong? I beat the young one, and now the old one is here? I don't care. The one before me couldn't even make me go all out. If you want to take turns, you need to find more people. Dragon God looked at Tianyang with disdain. I'll give you some face. You're much stronger than the other dragon tribes. However, the mysterious sky great world is really weak. Or are the dragon tribes here too weak? Dragon God said nonchalantly. Every word he said showed that he didn't care about the true dragon sacred world. On the other hand, Tianyang's expression was the same as before, with a hint of coldness. You want to fight me? Dragon God was shocked when Tianyang didn't say a word. You're really here to die. All right, I'll throw a punch. If you can take it, I'll fight you. Little Dragon God chuckled. His eyes flickered with disdain. In the next moment, his body flashed and his dragon energy exploded. This is a punch with my full strength. Dragon God laughed. The terrifying dragon energy was like a dragon god descending as he threw a punch at Tianyang. Tianyang's expression didn't change. He raised his hand. Bang! Little Dragon God's fist paused, and his body froze. Tianyang raised his left hand and swung it to the right. Smack! Boom! Chapter 1431. Boom! The slap was powerful and domineering. It landed on the side of Little Dragon God's face and sent him flying. Boom! 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 Little Dragon God's body was sent flying like a cannonball. He crashed through countless mountains in the true dragon sacred world and was sent flying for tens of thousands of miles. Furthermore, the little dragon god was doing his best to maintain his balance. If he hadn't resisted at all, he would have already become a corpse that circled around the true dragon sacred world. Seeing this, the red dragon saint was dumbfounded. Was this the Tianyang he knew? Was this the little dragon god he knew? The red dragon saint had seen the sword move that Tianyang used to kill Xianyuan Changsheng. It was also the first time Tianyang used that sword move in the Snow Sky Fox clan. At that time, Tianyang had used Wuzun's strength to injure the red dragon saint, who was a spiritual grade great saint. Before that, Tianyang had already broken through to the human grade great saint. Naturally, Tianyang's sword move was even more powerful. However, that was a sword. Tianyang had used his palm to send Little Dragon God flying. It was the same for Little Dragon God. They had never seen Little Dragon God use any weapon along the way. And those who used weapons were also crushed by Little Dragon God. Those who should have used weapons did not. Instead, he sent those who used weapons flying. Good, good, good. In the next moment, Little Dragon God rushed over with a look of ecstasy on his face. This is the person I'm looking for. Come, let's fight for 300 rounds. Little Dragon God laughed and threw out a punch. Terrifying dragon energy erupted. Little Dragon God's aura changed and his speed soared as he threw out a punch. Boom! Tianyang's expression did not change. He raised his right hand and blocked Little Dragon God's punch. At the same time, the spiritual grade, great saint's true yuan and physical strength erupted. Dragon King's unparalleled fist. He threw a punch at Little Dragon God's head. The Little Dragon God was once again sent flying by Tianyang's punch. However, in the next moment, the Little Dragon God flew over again. His dragon force continued to erupt as he unleashed one terrifying attack after another. Tianyang's expression did not change. He attacked instantly. No matter how fast Little Dragon God's attacks were, Tianyang blocked all of them and returned them at the same time. However, Tianyang's jaw dropped no matter how many times he threw Little Dragon God. Little Dragon God's Little Dragon God was like an indestructible rock. Great, great. That's it. That's right. Little Dragon God laughed maniacally as he launched one attack after another. Then his eyes narrowed and dragon flames burst out from his body. Universe Flame Universe Dragon God, Dragon Gods Dragon Dragon Gods as Dragons Dragons Dragons. Tianyang's expression changed slightly and his eyes narrowed. The power of this punch had far surpassed any attack that Tianyang had blocked before. Come at me with all your strength. Ha! If you can take this punch, you'll be invincible even in my world. Little Dragon God laughed heartily. Hearing this, Heavenly Sun's lips curled up. Are you sure you want to use my full strength? Tianyang smiled. Little Dragon God's Dragon God smile did not change. Of course. If you're not going, I'll go first. In the next moment, little dragon god's dragon flame punched at Tianyang. Although the punch seemed powerful, it did not shatter any space. It was just the high temperature of the dragon flame that caused the space to distort. Tianyang was shocked when he saw that. Little dragon god had cultivated his strength to such a level. This was equivalent to Tianyang before he fought the Centaur King. However, if it was before he went to the Ling Tian sect, little dragon god's dragon god might be able to cause some damage to Tianyang. However, the current Tianyang was far stronger than before. Sword realm, open. Tianyang smiled faintly. In an instant, the space around them changed. The sword Dao quintessence revolved, and everything within a radius of 10,000 miles became my sword world. What? Sword realm. Sword world. Little dragon god instantly sensed the changes in his surroundings. His expression changed drastically as he roared. Why didn't you tell me that you have a King sword realm? At the same time, the Chinko and Flame Fist also bombarded Tianyang. In front of them, it was blocked by Tianyang's great void sword embryo. Sword breaking 9 desolations. The casual slash of the sword contained an incomparably profound sword Dao. Instantly, little dragon god coughed up blood as an incomparably sharp power pierced into his body. However, just as the little dragon god was about to flee, Tianyang activated the sword realm. Countless swords instantly formed around the little dragon god. Every sword strike had an incomparably terrifying power. Up, down, left, right, front, back. Countless swords were waiting in every direction. If little dragon god made the slightest movement, these swords would mercilessly attack. Condensed quintessence, little dragon god instantly pulled a long face as he was wrapped up by the sword realm and thrown to the ground. Tianyang leisurely flew to the side of the red dragon sage. Done. Tianyang chuckled. The red dragon sage, on the other hand, had a surreal look on his face. He even had a feeling that little dragon god had gone easy on him. Earlier, little dragon god had swept away all the dragon clan in the Black Heaven Great World. He was incomparably domineering and killed all the dragon clan elites with one hand. However, in front of Tianyang, they were instantly beaten up. From the beginning to the end, they were all under Tianyang's control. In the end, even if the red dragon sage used the Dragon Emperor's seal, he would never be able to block the punch that little dragon god had used. However, Tianyang did something that easily broke it. What the hell was that? You're a guy who has condensed quintessence. How can you beat an earthly great saint like me? Little dragon god, who was lying on the ground, roared at Tianyang. You're courting death. What does it have to do with me? Tianyang smiled. Besides, you're an earthly great saint. How can you attack a spiritual great saint like me? With that, Tianyang's aura spread out. Little dragon god's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Spiritual great saint? Sword Dao quintessence? Condensing sword realm? Holy shit, what kind of freaking genius are you? Little dragon god shouted. Tianyang shrugged and found a seat to sit down. It doesn't matter whether I'm a freaking genius or not. I'm just stronger than you. Tianyang shrugged, then looked at little dragon god. However, your origin is quite important. The dragons of the Xintian Great World gather in the form of different races. There are very few of them who travel alone or gather in a small world like the true dragon sacred world. None of the dragons know who you are. Obviously, you can't be from the true dragon sacred world. However, there are no freaks like you who travel alone with unknown bloodlines. Tianyang said. During the battle earlier, Tianyang had a feeling. Little dragon god's bloodline was different from any bloodline he had ever seen. The giant fist looked like it belonged to the tyrant dragon tribe, but the dragon flame seemed to be a combination of the flame dragon tribe and the red dragon tribe. That's right. I'm not any of the bloodlines you're talking about. Little dragon god smiled proudly when he heard this. Chapter 1432. The Realm of the Gods. Hearing these 2 words, the Crimson Dragon Sage was confused, while the Heavenly Sun's expression changed. As expected, a great saint at the peak of the earthly grade might be invincible, but only among those of the same generation. However, this little dragon god had defeated all the members of the tyrant dragon tribe. It was almost impossible for such a person to appear in the Shantian Great World. If there was, the battle maniac Shao Zun of the Void Mountain wouldn't have only targeted him. He was a reincarnated person, an exception among exceptions. The Shantian macro world was one of the more advanced macro worlds in the myriad heavens. To be stronger than the Shantian Great World, the most likely possibility was the God Realm, which had left countless footprints on the Shantian Great World. If you're from the realm of the gods, what's your relationship with the tyrant dragon god? According to Tianyang's knowledge, the tyrant dragon god was the only immortal in the dragon tribe in the Shantian Great World. Since this little dragon god was from the realm of the gods, he was most likely related to the tyrant dragon god. The tyrant dragon god? The tyrant dragon god is the godfather of the son of my eldest brother's third uncle's grandfather. The little dragon god thought for a moment. Tianyang's expression did not change when he heard that, but the crimson dragon saint beside him looked like he was joking. So, you came to the Shantian Great World because of the tyrant dragon god? Tianyang didn't care about the relationship between the little dragon god and the tyrant dragon god. He just wanted to know if he was related to the tyrant dragon god. No, I was born in the realm of the gods, so I came here myself. The little dragon god chuckled. To be honest, the martial arts level in the Shantian Great World isn't bad. It's only average. Hai Yuanxiong of the Azure Sea Dragon tribe is quite talented. If she was born in the realm of the gods, she would probably be a spiritual or earthly grade great saint. However, you're the only one in the Shantian Great World who's qualified. The little dragon god said. Although he had been defeated by Tianyang, he still had a strong sense of disdain for the Shantian Great World. The red dragon sage, who was standing at the side, felt extremely aggrieved. However, even if he wanted to refute, there was nothing he could do. Tianyang was not from the Shantian Great World. He had only cultivated the 9-tempered dragon body and had little to do with the dragon tribe. Little dragon god's mockery really wasn't wrong. So you're saying that the divine world is much stronger than the Shantian macro world? Tianyang's expression remained unchanged as he chuckled. Hearing this, little dragon god immediately swelled up, revealing an incomparably arrogant look, and laughed loudly. Of course, it's rare for an immortal realm expert to appear in the Shantian Great World in tens of millions of years. Our great divinity world is filled with immortal realm experts. Little Dragon God was then completely unaware that Tianyang had tricked him into revealing a lot of things. For Tianyang, the divine realm was a must-visit. If he wanted to find out everything about the Great Destruction, the divine realm was the only place he could find clues about. From the little dragon god's boasting, Tianyang roughly understood what the god realm was like. The divine realm was the largest and most powerful world in the universe. Tianshao Great World was huge, but it was not even 1/5 the size of the Shantian Great World. A world like the Shantian Great World was even smaller than an ordinary region in the divine realm. The divine realm was extremely complicated. There were almost no countries in the Shantian Great World. Even in the Tianshao Great World, countries only existed in the northern wilderness region where there were fewer cultivators. However, the divine realm not only had countless martial sects, but also had divine kingdoms built by the gods themselves. There were also countless sects and cities. There were demon gods who ruled over a region, looking down on all heroes. There were human emperors who presided over the divine kingdoms and ruled over all living things. There were pill gods who could refine all things in the world with heavenly fire. There were sect ancestors whose divine might could suppress all worlds. Giant cities stabilized a region. Demon gods wreaked havoc in the world. Countless existences that were not seen in the macro world were all included in the divine realm. The center of the universe was the divine realm. Tianyang's blood boiled when he heard that. He was now at the peak of the Shantian Great World. However, according to Little Dragon God, Saint Emperors did not have a very high status in the divine realm. Most of the younger generation, like him, were great saints. The tyrant dragon god of your Shantian Great World has a high status in the divine dragon clan, so I dare not do anything to the dragon clan of the Shantian Great World. However, the dragon clan of the Shantian Great World is still too weak. Every one of you has cultivated for tens of thousands of years, and your cultivation level is higher than mine, but you still can't beat me." Little Dragon God laughed. Tianyang's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. "How old are you now?" "Me?" Little Dragon God was stunned for a moment, then laughed disdainfully. "In a few decades, I should be 1,000 years old." The Crimson Dragon Sage and the other Dragon Sage's expressions changed drastically. 1,000 years old in a few decades? Didn't that mean Little Dragon God was only 900 years old? He was only 900 years old, but he was already an earthly great saint, and his combat strength was on par with the great saint elder of the Azure Sea Dragon clan. This cultivation speed was on a completely different level from the great saints of the Xiantian Great World, who took tens of thousands of years to reach the saint realm. The average age of a great saint was close to 1,000,000 years old. Of course, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the divine realm far surpasses that of the Xiantian Great World, and there is also an extremely glorious martial arts civilization. Your Xiantian Great World is not too bad. Little Dragon God said with a sense of superiority. Based on what I've seen and heard in the divine realm, all you need to do is continue to create stronger cultivation techniques and develop them for close to 100 million years. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. Was there a civilization that was destroyed 10,000 years ago in the divine realm? A civilization that was destroyed? Little Dragon God was stunned. Nothing happened 10,000 years ago. Tianyang's heart sank when he heard that. 10,000 years ago, the great annihilation of all the civilizations in the universe did not happen in the God realm. It seemed that the divine realm was indeed special. But if you want to talk about something similar, I think there was 1/10 of millions of years ago. At that time, the divine realm was in a state of misery and suffering. It almost went back 10 million years. Little Dragon God spoke frankly. At this time, Tianyang saw that Little Dragon God was about to empty his pockets and smiled. "Then, do you want to return to the divine realm?" Tianyang smiled. Little Dragon Sage shuddered and looked at Tianyang. That smile, no matter how he looked at it, it was filled with evil intentions. "Of course I want to. There is someone in the Xiantian Great World who can defeat me. I have to go back and cultivate well, then come back and defeat you." Little Dragon God looked around in confusion. "By the way, why did you open up the Sword Realm?" Tianyang smiled faintly. "Of course it's to rob." Chapter 1433. What the F*** are you guys trying to do? Little Dragon God roared and unleashed all of his draconic energy. However, he was only a peak Earth-rank great saint. Even if he came from the divine world, he was far from being able to condense an origin. As soon as the Sword Realm was opened, Little Dragon God was naturally sealed inside without any resistance. "Didn't you hear me? I'll say it again. Robbery," Tianyang said with a smile. Although he didn't fully trust the Stegosaurus and the other two Sword Beast Kings, it was true that they had fought for him. In that case, they could be considered as one of his own. Little Dragon God had almost crippled one of his own. What else did Tianyang have to say? Our robbery. Little Dragon God was stunned. He had lived for over 900 years, but he had never heard anyone say that in front of him. He was a young prodigy of the divine dragon tribe. Not many people dared to speak to him, and he rarely went out. This was the first time he had heard the word robbery. "That's right, it's robbery." Tianyang smiled. "However, it's not up to me to decide what to rob." With a wave of his hand, Tianyang summoned the Stegosaurus King. "Master." A sword origin could at most keep the Stegosaurus King from collapsing, but his body was still incomparably illusory. Seeing this, Tianyang frowned and looked at Little Dragon God. "Here, Stegosaurus King, what do you want? Look for him. If he doesn't have it, beat him up and get him to change." That's right, Tianyang was protective of his own people. Little Dragon God? Tianyang didn't know him at all. So what if he was related to the Tyrant Dragon God? He wasn't familiar with the Tyrant Dragon God. However, even though he wasn't familiar with the Stegosaurus King, he was still one of his own. Which one was more worthy of protection? The Stegosaurus King had been condensing sword beasts for a long time. He was confused when he heard this. What was going on? The Stegosaurus King said hesitantly, "The spoils of war should be decided by the master." What spoils of war? This is compensation. Little Dragon God is giving you compensation understand? Tianyang curled his lips and smiled. Since Little Dragon God is from the God world, you should know more about equivalent exchange and post-war compensation than me, right? Upon hearing this, Little Dragon God's face instantly turned bitter. Understand? He didn't understand, and he didn't want to understand, but he had to understand now. Sure, your subordinate should be a sword spirit, right? I have a spirit sculpting pill that is very useful for condensing a sword spirit. Here you go. Little Dragon God raised his hand, and a bottle flew out. Tianyang caught it steadily, but he didn't open it immediately. Instead, he was slightly moved. Spirit sculpting pill? A Peak Saint grade pill? These are all the treasures that are useful to the sword spirit. If you don't want them, then I don't have any more. Little Dragon God shrugged. However, after Tianyang appraised it, he injected a spirit molding pill into the Stegosaurus King's body. Go to the side and refine it properly, Heavenly Sun Dao said. Then, he looked at Little Dragon God in surprise. It seemed that he had underestimated the God world. It wasn't just the martial way. The alchemy way of the God world was also incomparably powerful. All right, I'll let you off for now. Tianyang nodded slightly and removed the seal on the sword realm. Little Dragon God curled his lips and said, "What? Little brother, if you want to compensate for being beaten up by me, then find something else to say. You said it was a robbery, but I was afraid that you would kill me." Hearing this, Tianyang smiled slightly, but didn't comment. The Red Dragon Saint, who was standing at the side, was dumbfounded as he watched what might be the most peaceful robbery in history. Tianyang, do you have anything else to do after returning to the true Dragon Sacred World? The Red Dragon Saint asked hopefully. He couldn't wait for Tianyang to stay. Tianyang was the person who killed the half-holy emperor ancestor of the Xianyuan family and annihilated the entire Xianyuan family. No matter where he was in the Xiantian Great World, he had the ability to be an honored guest of any faction. There were less than 10 holy emperors in the Xiantian Great World. The only one who was still alive was probably the Dragon Emperor. There might be fewer half-holy emperors, but they represented the strongest strength below the Holy Emperor. If Tianyang could kill a half-holy emperor, that meant that as long as a holy emperor didn't appear, Tianyang was invincible. Yes, then I won't go find trouble with the other dragon tribes. You're Tianyang, right? Just you wait. When you reach the God world, I'll be the first to challenge you. Little Dragon God said, his eyes filled with the desire to fight. Tianyang smiled and said, "Sure." Little Dragon God's figure flashed and left the true dragon sacred world. Tianyang didn't have much intention to keep him. Little Dragon God's greatest use to him was to bring him news about the God world. Previously, when he came into contact with the God world, it was mostly a blur. This time, Little Dragon God's arrival allowed Tianyang to see the outline of the God world of his mind. Moreover, he also found out about the great destruction of the civilization. It seems like the mastermind behind the great destruction of the civilization is in the God world. Tianyang smiled and said, "I wonder where the Crimson Dragon tribe buried Crimson Dragon Wuzun." Little Dragon Saint was stunned when he heard this. Then, he thought of something and revealed a shocked expression. "Could it be that you— All right, I'll take you there now." The Crimson Dragon Sage soared into the sky, and Heavenly Sun followed. Outside Crimson Dragon City, outside an ordinary grave. Crimson Dragon Wuzun didn't want the Crimson Dragon tribe to remember him, so he only left a small tombstone. However, as long as it's a member of the Crimson Dragon tribe, we'll remember him. Little Dragon Saint said. Tianyang looked at the grave in front of him and nodded silently. Hundreds of millions of years ago, on Heaven Continent, the existence that led the primordial human tribe to glory was most likely the first human Wuzun. However, at this moment, he was lying in a foreign land. After hundreds of millions of years, Crimson Dragon Wuzun's ashes had probably merged with this land. Senior Crimson Dragon Wuzun, I've completed the 9 refined dragon body that you left behind, although it might be different from what you initially thought. Tianyang said slowly as a crimson scroll appeared in his hand. The 9 refined dragon body scroll that he obtained before he died in his past life was exactly the same as this scroll. Tianyang asked the Ling Tian sect supreme elder to search for the best scroll material and made it himself. It was practically the same. However, there was more content in this scroll. Now, I'll return it to its rightful owner. Tianyang bowed and sent the crimson scroll deep into the ground without stirring up any soil. At the same time, streaks of dragon energy erupted from Tianyang's body. 9 refined dragon body, activate. Boom. The surrounding space was shattered by the terrifying power of the 9 refined dragon body. Only the grave in front of Tianyang remained unscathed. When the 9 refined dragon body is cultivated to the end, I can forge the body of a great saint, Tianyang said. Chapter 1434. After burying the 9 refined dragon body scroll in front of Wu Zun's grave, Tianyang stopped and walked toward the dragon saint. Wu Zun gave you the 9 refined dragon body when he was alive. That means that he wanted his 9 refined dragon body to be brought to greater heights. Then, I'll give you this 9 refined dragon body scroll, Tianyang said, holding another 9 refined dragon body scroll in his hand. It was different from the scroll that was buried in front of the Scarlet Dragon Martial Honorable's tomb. This scroll was only made of ordinary materials. However, the dragon saint trembled with excitement when he heard that. Are you sure? This was the complete version of the 9 refined dragon body. If one could cultivate it to the 9th refinement, one's physical body would enter the supreme saint realm. The previous 9 refined dragon body was at most a heaven-rank martial technique. However, Tianyang could create the 8th refinement of the saint realm, which was already considered a saint martial technique. As for the complete 9 refined dragon body, it was another level above the sacred martial realm. One had to know that Tianyang had not cultivated the 9th refinement of the 9 refined dragon body to perfection. That meant that this technique still had great potential. In terms of value, it was not inferior to some Saint Emperor martial techniques. After all, this was a body-tempering technique. Red Dragon Wu Zun's last wish. Tianyang said, however, this 9 refined dragon body is still a little inferior to the diamond body tempering sacred technique of the Diamond Temple. It's also much more difficult to cultivate. If one's talent is not there, cultivating it rashly will only yield half the result. Moreover, if you want to pass it down, you can't just pass it down like the incomplete version of the 9 refined dragon body. Hearing this, the Crimson Dragon Sage was taken aback, then nodded heavily. Of course, I'll put this scroll on the top floor of the Crimson Dragon Pagoda. Only those of the Crimson Dragon tribe who have reached a certain level of cultivation and state of mind can cultivate it. That would be best. Tianyang chuckled and nodded. That was what he had in mind. However, isn't it too cheap to give such a valuable cultivation method to us? The Crimson Dragon Sage said uneasily after thinking about it. I forgot to take a few drops of Little Dragon God's blood. The True Dragon Sacred Domain doesn't seem to have any use for me. Since this is a gift from Crimson Dragon Wu Zun, please accept it. Tianyang smiled. He was from the Sky Continent, so naturally, he respected the Scarlet Dragon, revered martial artist. Since Crimson Dragon Wu Zun had passed down his 9-tempered dragon body to the Crimson Dragon clan before his death, then Tianyang could do the same. Don't try to persuade me anymore. If you continue to persuade me, I might feel that I've lost too much and ask for it back, Tianyang said with a smile. Hearing this, the Crimson Dragon Sage smiled bitterly. Then all right. After that, Tianyang left the True Dragon Sacred World. A few decades later, the first person who met the requirements to cultivate the 9-tempered dragon body had a breakthrough in his physical strength. After cultivating for a few thousand years, he had already entered the sacred body stage. Only then did the Crimson Dragon clan realize how precious the 9-tempered dragon body that Tianyang had given them was. Hundreds of thousands of years later, the Crimson Dragon clan had successfully used the 9-tempered dragon body to become the strongest dragon clan in the Xiantian Great World. Like Wu Zun, Tianyang's name was engraved in the history of the Crimson Dragon clan and the Dragon clan in the Xiantian Great World. In fact, he was even more dazzling than Wu Zun. After leaving the True Dragon Sacred World, Tianyang's frown eased. Since I become a spiritual great saint, there shouldn't be much to cultivate in the short term. Why don't I go back to the Tianshao Great World and have a look? Tianyang smiled. He missed the hometown that he had been away from for more than a decade. However, I still have to talk to Tianhao first. Maybe he wants to go back too. The head of the Tian family, who had disappeared when Tianyang was young, had suddenly returned with terrifying strength. If the Tian family's grand elder knew about this, he would probably regret it in the underworld. However, just as Tianyang was thinking about it, the communication token started to vibrate rapidly. Tianyang frowned slightly and immediately took out the communication token. It was a message from the Demon Dragon Crown Prince. The Demon Dragon Crown Prince? Why is he sending a message? Tianyang was slightly taken aback. There were many people who could send him a message, but the most unlikely one was the Dragon Demons. The Dragon Demons had just recovered from the Dragon Emperor, and the Demon Dragon Crown Prince had returned with a great increase in strength from the Sumera domain. No matter how he thought about it, there shouldn't be anything to do with him, the honorary Grand Elder. However, Tianyang didn't care and immediately looked at the message. However, the Demon Dragon Crown Prince's message made Tianyang's expression turn ugly. Tianyang, Demoness Linglong suddenly went berserk and snatched all the information about you from my Dragon Demons and Star Demon Trading Company. Then, she flew towards the northern desert. She might want to make a move on your parents. The Demon Dragon Crown Prince's anxious roar seemed to condense into form, and Tianyang's expression gradually turned ugly. What's going on? He had an impression of Demoness Linglong. When she first appeared in Chaos Demon City, she was the only great saint who pretended to be a pig to eat the tiger. The Demon Dragon Crown Prince was extremely afraid of her. Moreover, she could enter and leave the dragon demons at will. Even the Dragon Emperor didn't seem to be willing to talk too much about Demoness Linglong. Then, in the Sumera domain, Demoness Linglong helped the Demon Dragon Crown Prince to successfully enter the top 10 of the Sumera domain, allowing the Demon Dragon Crown Prince to obtain a chance to be baptized by the Sumera domain. Other than Demoness Linglong's evil side that made Tianyang a little concerned, there was nothing else. Tianyang also didn't have any enmity with her. Why did she suddenly go berserk? Anyway, hurry up and find your parents. Before Tianyang could reply, the Demon Dragon Crown Prince sent a message over. What's going on with Demoness Linglong? Tianyang roared, and the message was instantly transmitted to the Demon Dragon Crown Prince. At the same time, he burst out with extreme speed towards the northern wilderness Great Desert. He and Tianhao had a bloodline connection, and the undying bloodline would resonate with each other. Therefore, Tianyang could also find Tianhao's location. Far away in the southern Devil Ghost region, the Demon Dragon Crown Prince's face revealed a bitter expression when he saw Tianyang's message. Demoness Linglong isn't actually a member of the Dragon Demons. She's from a race called the Heavenly Spirit Race. The Demon Dragon Crown Prince explained. Tianyang frowned slightly. Heavenly Spirit Race? He had never heard of such a race. Not only is she from the Heavenly Spirit Race, but she's also the leader of the Heavenly Spirit Race. Although Demoness Linglong's cultivation isn't very strong, if she goes all out, even a heaven-grade Great Sage wouldn't be her match. What's going on? A human-grade Great Sage defeated a heaven-grade Great Sage? Since when are geniuses so worthless? Tianyang frowned, and at the same time, he rushed towards the northern wilderness Great Desert. It's not that she's worthless, it's because... Chapter 1435. As the saying went, the higher one stood, the further one could see, and the more information one would know. Tianyang had always believed that this was the case, and the reality was that it was true. However, there were far too many of them. He had never heard of the Divine Realm when he was in Wu Zun's realm, and he only knew a few words about it when he was in the Saint Realm. As soon as he became a great saint, countless information about the Divine Realm popped up. Although Tianyang had been dealing with things related to the Divine Realm recently, this information came too suddenly, and Tianyang felt that the Divine Realm was not a secret at all. In fact, although there were not many traces of the Divine Realm in the Shintian Great World, it was not few either. The Heaven's Expanse Temple had existed countless years before the Nine-Universe Saint Emperor. Sword godling Tian was from the ancient times. The tyrant dragon god was also a dragon god from the ancient times. As long as the tyrant dragon god was in the divine realm, it was not surprising that the little dragon god would come to the Xiantian Great World. As for Ling Long, Tianyang had noticed something was wrong with her when he was in Chaos Demon City, but he did not think about the divine realm at that time. She suddenly became a great saint, and all the clues were revealed, which made Tianyang feel that way. At that moment, Tianyang's expression had also turned ugly. Someone from the divine realm? The demon dragon crown prince said that Ling Long could fight a heaven grade great saint, but that was only when she used the true yuan of a human grade great saint. What if Ling Long was hiding her strength? It was not impossible for someone from the divine realm to hide from the demon dragon crown prince. Perhaps the dragon emperor had already seen through it, but he did not expect Ling Long to suddenly go crazy, so he did not tell Tianyang. After all, Tianyang and Ling Long did not have much connection before. So, what does being from the divine realm and her sudden search for me have to do with finding my parents? Tianyang said hurriedly. Now, they had passed the Snow Fox clan and officially entered the northern wilderness Great Desert. However, they were still some distance away from where Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming were. The Heavenly Spirit clan is not only from the God realm, but also has a great connection with the God realm. You could say that the Heavenly Spirit tribe is the information channel between the God realm and the Xiantian Great Cosmos. The Demon Dragon Crown Prince's words were also as short as possible to pass the information to Tianyang as quickly as possible. When Tianyang saw this, he frowned deeply. Could it be that there was something in the God realm that was related to him? Since bewitching Ling Long suddenly made a move, it's very likely that something in the firmament has set its eyes on you. In other words, you and Tian Hao both have something, but I can't be sure. Maybe Ling Long wants to use Tian Hao to threaten you. Father has already made his move. However, the Heavenly Spirit race's supernatural powers are strange and inexplicable. We can't find Ling Long at all, and the dragon demons don't have any power in the northern wilderness desert. So, I can only ask for your help for the time being. After the demon dragon crown prince finished speaking, there was no more news. Tianyang's face turned serious. Tianyang wasn't afraid of Ling Long. He was already a spiritual grade great saint. If he used the sky-devouring secret skill, he might be able to enter the earth grade if he was lucky. Even if he was at the peak of the spiritual grade, with the power of the sword realm, he could fight against a fake holy king like the demon sword spirit. No matter how strong Ling Long was, she couldn't be a holy king. Otherwise, the Dragon Emperor wouldn't allow Ling Long to walk freely among the dragon demons. This means that she might be slightly stronger than Xianyuan Changshan. Tianyang estimated his opponent and quickly flew towards the location that he sensed. The West Spirit State was very close to the northern wilderness desert. However, it still took Tianyang 6 hours to fly from the true dragon's sacred world to the northern wilderness desert. Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming were in the depths of the northern wilderness desert. The distance was even further than the distance from the true dragon sacred world to the northern wilderness desert. I don't know when Ling Long made her move. If I knew, I wouldn't be in such a hurry. Tianyang's face turned ugly. He activated the 7th change of the Heavenly Expanse 9 transformations and rushed towards the target. Among the dragon demons, the Dragon Emperor's face was also extremely ugly. To think that the dragon demons have always been the Heavenly Spirit tribe's protection and influence in the Xiantian Great World. I didn't expect the Heavenly Spirit tribe to do such a thing. The Dragon Emperor's darkness origin energy surged. If he didn't restrain it with all his might, he would have destroyed the entire dragon demons. Even so, one could see how angry the Dragon Emperor was. Just as Tianyang had guessed, the dragon demons and the Heavenly Spirit tribe were dependent on each other. The Heavenly Spirit tribe only had a few members. However, because they could communicate with the divine world, the dragon demons and the Heavenly Spirit tribe had been on good terms for generations. The method that the dragon demons used to suppress the demon blood in their bodies was also given to them by the Heavenly Spirit tribe. In exchange, the dragon demons were responsible for protecting the Heavenly Spirit tribe. At the same time, They would expand the Heavenly Spirit Tribe's influence and give the Heavenly Spirit Tribe the strongest information channel in the Xiantian Great World. The representative was the Star Demon Trading Company. Now, the Dragon Emperor finally knew why the Heavenly Dragon Demons needed information channels. Pass down my order. Arrest the Heavenly Spirit Tribe. The Dragon Emperor growled. However, an elder immediately rushed in. Lord Dragon Emperor, the Heavenly Spirit Tribe has gone missing. Hearing that, the Dragon Emperor was stunned. His face was filled with rage. Heavenly Spirit Tribe. Attacking the Dragon Emperor's benefactor and the Dragon Demon's benefactor had already touched the bottom line of the Dragon Emperor and the entire Dragon Demons. The arrest warrant remains unchanged. Pass it down. The Dragon Emperor roared. The entire Dragon Demons were in turmoil. Just as the Dragon Demons were in turmoil, Tianyang finally found Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming. Isn't this Tianyang? Xianyuan Qingming exclaimed in surprise when she saw Tianyang in midair. Tian Hao, who was fishing, also turned his head and was slightly stunned. Then, he put down his fishing rod and flew up to Tianyang. What are you doing here? Tian Hao was puzzled. Logically speaking, shouldn't Tianyang be strengthening his strength to take revenge on the Xianyuan family? Seeing that Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming were fine, Tianyang heaved a sigh of relief and said, I killed the Xianyuan family patriarch, Xianyuan Changsheng, and the Xianyuan family was completely destroyed. From now on, in the entire Xiantian Great World, only Mother has the Xianyuan bloodline, Tianyang said. Hearing this, Tian Hao was stunned for a moment. Then a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. Are you telling the truth? Tian Hao would never forget that the culprit behind the destruction of his family and the destruction of his family was the Xianyuan family. Now, the Xianyuan family was destroyed? Revenge. Revenge. Of course, the Xianyuan sword is with me. If you want to see it, you can see it at any time. Tianyang chuckled. Below, Xianyuan Qingming was delighted at first, then her expression became complicated. After all, the Xianyuan family had nurtured her for many years. The Xianyuan sword and whatnot. You should wait a few years to see it. Your Excellency Tianyang, I've been rude. I'll take your parents away first. Rays of bright light bloomed. In the next moment, Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming suddenly disappeared in front of Tianyang. Tianyang's face suddenly turned ashen as he looked up. Bewitching Lady Linglong was in the sky. Her aura was no longer that of a human grade great sage, but peak spiritual grade great sage. Ling, Long, demon, girl. Seeing this, the great void sword embryo appeared in Tianyang's hand, and he roared. Chapter 1436. Sword Realm. At that instant, several powerful forces encapsulated the area within 10,000 li, including bewitching woman Linglong. Sword Realm? You've condensed the Sword Dao origin. Linglong was taken aback when she saw this. Then, the corners of her mouth curled into a smile. As expected of the existence that Lord is paying attention to. He's only a spiritual grade great saint, but he's actually able to condense the sword principle origin and use the Sword Realm. That sort of talent is something that not even your humble servant is capable of. In the next moment, streaks of terrifying holy light burst out from Linglong's body. However, my methods might not necessarily be inferior to the Sword Realm. Linglong chuckled, and instantly, a realm was opened. It forcefully opened up a new world in Tianyang's Sword Realm. Seeing this, Tianyang's pupil shrank. He could sense that the holy light did not contain any origin energy. In other words, Linglong's comprehension of the Great Tao was far inferior to him, but she was able to use a realm to open up her Sword Realm. This is my Heavenly Spirit Clan's technique. It's impossible for a human to learn it. Linglong covered her mouth and chuckled. However, it seems like I can't beat you. This time, I'll just take your parents away. Tisk tsk. Why are all the people with the surname Tian so strong? At this moment, Tianyang's figure suddenly flashed. A brilliant glow was emitted. Sword Realm seal. At the same time, sword breaking 9 desolation. Tianyang roared, and the great void sword embryo released waves of sharp light. which violently blasted towards Ling Long. Ling Long's expression did not change. She released her heavenly spirit realm, and her jade-like hand collided with the sharp sword edge of the great void sword embryo. Boom! A loud sound was heard, and the aftermath caused the surrounding mountains and lakes to explode. The mountains were reduced to nothing, and the entire mountain range was reduced to a basin. She blocked the sword-breaking 9 desolation with her hand. Seeing this, Tianyong was shocked. At this moment, Ling Long separated a wave of true energy and sealed Tian Hao and Xinyuan Qingming. Then, he threw it down. The corners of her mouth curled up into a charming smile. It seems that I might be able to complete the task left behind by that lord in one go. In the next moment, Ling Long's true yuan erupted from her body. Incomparably resplendent light surged out. In the next moment, Ling Long blasted out her palm. Heavenly Spirit Restriction Break. A giant palm print was formed rapidly, followed by the shaking of the heavens and earth. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. His sword world had actually been shaken by Ling Long's palm strike. Just how monstrous was the heavenly spirit race? Torrential storm of rose flowers. Tianyang snorted coldly and slashed out again. Boom, 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 boom. Sword light erupted like a violent storm. Within the sword world, its might was countless times stronger. In an instant, it shattered Ling Long's palm and ruthlessly slammed into her body. However, Ling Long's figure flashed in a strange manner, and she actually dodged the storm-like sword attack. At the same time, she came behind Tianyang and punched out. That punch of yours truly isn't easy to take. Ling Long giggled. At this moment, Tianyang's primordial spirit power surged. God-piercing saber. Ice Spirit's secret skill. In an instant, Ling Long was caught off guard and was hit by Tianyang's 2 primordial spirit secret skills. At that moment, Tianyang attacked. Reincarnation of life and death. 1 black and 1 white sword light, symbolizing life and death, blasted out fiercely. It was as if the entire heavens and earth had turned into a state of life and death. Life and death of all living beings, a line of reincarnation, exterminate. Tianyang roared furiously. The black and white sword light suddenly turned into a wheel and hit Ling Long. Ling Long spat out a mouthful of blood, and her entire body was sent flying. Tianyang took advantage of the opportunity to pursue and attack. He released the 7th change of the Heavenly Expanse 9 changes, and in a flash, he appeared in front of Ling Long and slashed down, sword breaking 9 desolates. At the same time, the power of the sword realm acted on Tianyang and Ling Long. To Tianyang, it strengthened, but to Ling Long, it weakened. Heavenly Spirit Seal. After being hit by the reincarnation of life and death, Ling Long did not lose her combat strength. She snorted coldly, and light gathered in her hands. The Heavenly Spirit territory opened up and directly neutralized the power of the sword realm. At the same time, her hands formed a seal. Boom! The seal and the sword collided together fiercely. Intense ripples appeared in the space, and the surrounding mountains collapsed. However, Tianyang had already released the heavenly devouring secret skill. The collapsed mountains and the large lake that was polluted by debris had all turned into Tianyang's power at this moment. In an instant, Tianyang's aura skyrocketed, and he stepped into the peak of the spiritual grade. He was at the same level as Ling Long. What? Upon seeing this, Ling Long's expression changed, and she instantly turned ugly. She had seen Tianyang's secret skill in Chaos Demon City. However, she did not expect that the secret skill would have such a great effect at the Great Saint Realm. Heavenly Spirit Seal. Break. The true origin of a great saint, who was also at the peak of the spiritual grade, surged rapidly, providing endless power to the mysterious and complicated seal. However, it still could not block Tianyang's sword. 10,000 destruction. Tianyang slashed out again, and the origin of chaos was injected into it. Chaotic Qi was released. The 10 sages down-merged, and a sword could destroy all things. In an instant, the Sky Spirit Hidden Divine Seal was blasted to smithereens. Tianyang's figure flashed, and the sharp Great Void Sword embryo was replaced by the Xianyuan sword. Although the Xianyuan sword belonged to the Xianyuan family, as a holy royal weapon, The offensive power of the Xianyuan sword was undoubtedly stronger than the Great Void Sword embryo. It could be used as the final blow. Damn it! Sensing the destructive aura released by the Xianyuan sword, Linglong's face changed drastically. She bit the tip of her tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Then, the blood essence burned up and turned into an endless amount of powerful energy. Heavenly Spirit Forbidden Skill. Linglong roared, and the Heavenly Spirit domain exploded to the maximum. A terrifying aura from the divine world was released from Linglong's body. Tianyang's face was also filled with shock. He could sense the threat of this move. It was much stronger than Xianyuan Changxing's holy treasure river. Heavenly Spirit Break. Bewitching Lady Linglong uttered a groan as a powerful force that did not belong to this world burst out. In an instant, an extremely terrifying destructive force was unleashed from both of Linglong's jade-like hands. A destructive light beam was shot towards Tianyang. At this moment, Tianyang snorted. In an instant, Heavenly Sword. The Heavenly Sword was not just the kind of sword light that could destroy the heavens and earth. Under Tianyang's control of the Heavenly Sword could be used many times in a weakened version. Boom! With the support of the Xianyuan sword's holy royal weapon and the Heavenly Sword's peak holy grade martial spirit, the destructive light beam was stopped. However, at this moment, Linglong spat out another mouthful of blood essence, and the power of the Heavenly Spirit Break increased by another level. Boom! Chapter 1437. Boom! Sky Firmament's sword shattered, and Sky Sun's pupils rapidly shrank. Even Tianyang's sword was broken. How strong was the Heavenly Spirit Tribe? Looks like young Master Su's attack isn't that strong. I wonder if young Master Su will be able to withstand this move of mine? Linglong giggled. Tianyang's face darkened. The Xianyuan sword in his hand emitted waves of xinguang. The Xianyuan sword was no weaker than the Lingtian ancient sword that sword god Lingtian had used in the Xiantian Great World. However, it was not affected by divine power. That was why it did not evolve into a semi-divine weapon like the Lingtian ancient sword. However, a saintly royal weapon was the limit of Heavenly Sun's power. At that time, he was able to fight the spirit of the evil sword, so he was naturally able to resist the attack of a half-saint emperor like Linglong now. Sword Realm, Annihilation. The power of the Sword Realm erupted crazily. Streaks of powerful destructive power shot out mercilessly. Tianyang's expression did not change. He slashed with the Xianyuan sword. Torrential Pear Blossoms. The Sword Realm, the Xianyuan sword, the Sword Dao origin source, and the Primal Chaos Chi. In an instant, the sword unleashed a terrifying power that even the sword cleaving 9 desolates could not compare to. It fiercely collided with the destructive light formed by the Heaven Spirit Forbidden technique. Boom! The surrounding space was torn apart in an instant, breaking free from the Xiantian macro world. The divine central continent was protected by the vast divine sect and the Ling Tian sect. That was why the battle between Tianyang and Xianyuan Changsheng did not destroy the entire divine central continent. However, the northern wilderness desert was sparsely populated. There was not much protection. The mountain range was torn into a basin by the aftershock. Some of the sword chi even penetrated deep into the ground, causing the earth to shake. After shattering the Heavenly Spirit Forbidden technique, it no longer had the power to shatter the torrential pear blossoms. It was hit by countless sword chi and disappeared. As for the Rain of Swords, they ruthlessly blasted towards Linglong. As expected of young Master Su, who has comprehended the origin source, this servant is ashamed of her inferiority. Linglong giggled as she unleashed her true yuan to block the torrential pear blossoms. But young Master Su is strong. But are his parents really that strong? Upon hearing this, Tianyang's pupils shrunk, while Linglong's figure suddenly disappeared. Their target was the couple Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming. Damn it! Tianyang's figure flashed as he charged towards Linglong at lightning speed. Before this, he had been controlling the aftermath of the battle, not allowing it to affect Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming. If Linglong captured Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming, then what was the point of him rushing to the northern barren desert? Get over here. He unleashed the Sword Realm, and powerful Sword Dao energy shot out, hindering Ling Long's advance. However, Ling Long was like a loach, easily dodging the sword realm. She was getting closer and closer to Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming. Hee, I dare not say that I could defeat young Master Su in battle, but the Heavenly Spirit Tribe is known for their speed. With young Master Su's speed, it will take him tens of thousands of years to catch up with me. Ling Long laughed. Now, she only needed to stretch out her hand to capture Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming, who were sealed by the Heavenly Spirit Tribe's power. Come over. That lord will not treat you badly. Bewitching Lady Ling Long said with a smile as a raging flame burned in her heart. As long as she completed the task of capturing Tianyang and Tianyang's parents, the Heavenly Spirit Tribe could return to the Divine Realm. If she only captured Tianyang's parents, then she could return to the Divine Realm alone for a while. Ling Long had had enough of the thin spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the mysterious sky great world. Even the dragon demons and other blessed lands could not compare to a corner of the Divine Realm. Space-time blink. At this moment, Tianyang let out a low roar. The surrounding space-time was completely frozen. Ling Long had Xianyuan Changxing's strength, but she did not have his cultivation. Moreover, Tianyang's space-time blink was strengthened by the Sword Realm. It was stronger than any of the previous space-time blink. Even bewitching woman Ling Long was frozen for 3 seconds by the space-time freeze. And within these 3 seconds, it was enough for Tianyang to keep Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming in the Vientiane sky ruins. 1, 2, 3. 3 seconds had passed, and Ling Long had returned to normal. However, Tianyang, who was extremely far away from her, appeared in front of her. Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming, whom she had sealed with the power of the Heavenly Spirit Tribe, also disappeared. Space-time. Origin. Ling Long's face was filled with disbelief for the first time as she stared at Tianyang. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. She could return to the Divine Realm and breathe in the Divine Realm's spiritual energy. If you're not afraid of death, you can try to snatch it from me, Tianyang said indifferently. At this moment, he was really angry. What Ling Long had done had already crossed his bottom line. Since young Master Su has comprehended the space-time origin and is so strong, wouldn't it be suicide for me to snatch it from you? Ling Long quickly adjusted her posture and stood in the air as she chuckled. However, even if young Master Su has comprehended the space-time origin, it's almost impossible for you to catch me. After saying that, Ling Long gradually disappeared. The one who spoke just now was just an afterimage of her. However, young Master Su, don't think that everything is fine now. That lord from the Undying Emperor Hall won't let this matter go so easily. After saying that, Ling Long's figure completely disappeared. Tianyang's face darkened. He did not plan to chase after Ling Long. After all, if he did not use the space-time instant, he would not have been able to catch up with Ling Long's speed. Even the Dragon Emperor could not sense Ling Long's aura. If he chased after her, it would be a waste of effort. Now, Tianyang was thinking about Ling Long's last words. Divine Realm, Undying Emperor? The Sky Tyrant Dragon God's expression changed when he knew that I have the Undying bloodline. It seems like the Tian family of Heaven Continent is not the only main bloodline of the Undying Heavenly Lord. In other words, the other bloodlines left behind by the Undying Heavenly Lord have also developed their own forces. Forces that belong to the Undying bloodline. To be able to cultivate to Tianyang's level, no matter if it was strength or intelligence, they were far from ordinary. Therefore, after Tian Hao and I revealed our Undying bloodline, the Heavenly Spirit Clan, which is the channel between the Divine World and Mysterious Sky Great World, received the news and reported it to the Undying Emperor. The Undying Emperor wants to capture the Undying bloodline. In just an instant, Tianyang had a complete meridian. Although there were many details that were unclear, Tianyang had already guessed it. Heavenly Spirit Race, Undying Imperial Court. Chapter 1438. The Undying Emperor Court was like a huge rock that weighed heavily on Tianyang's heart. The Undying Emperor Hall was a huge power in the Divine World. Compared to the Xianyuan family, the Medicine God sect, and the Vajra Temple, the Undying Emperor Hall was much bigger. Just the mention of the Undying bloodline was enough to make Tianyang pay attention to it with all his might. Only Tianyang knew how terrifying the undying bloodline was. He had cultivated the undying bloodline to the third layer of the undying divine body and the undying eye, undying bone, and undying blood to the great success stage. If one cultivated the immortal blood to the level of rebirth from a single drop, they would be like a cockroach that couldn't be killed. Furthermore, the immortal Emperor Court was one of the strongest forces in the divine world. It was very possible that they had more than just the immortal blood, immortal bone, and immortal eyes. Tianyang was already so strong after cultivating the third layer. If he cultivated the fourth layer, how strong would he be? In short, the mysterious sky great world is no longer safe. Tianyang said with a frown. Since Ling Long had escaped, she was a huge threat. Who knew if Ling Long would take advantage of the time when he was cultivating to make a comeback? This time, he had the Dragon Emperor and Demon Dragon Crown Prince's timely warning. Next time, and the time after that, I originally wanted to go back to Heavenly Cloud out of interest, but now it has become a must. Tianyang smiled bitterly and looked at Tian Hao and Xianyuan Qingming, who were gradually awakening from the seal after Ling Long escaped. Then, Tianyang waved his hand and released Ling Yuhan and Yun Xianyuan from the Vientiane sky ruins. After listening to Tianyang's explanation, Ling Yuhan felt a lingering fear before looking at Tianyang in surprise. Master, you're saying you want to go back to Heavenly Cloud Continent? Ling Yuhan was pleasantly surprised. Then, she looked nostalgic. I wonder how everyone in the Soaring Cloud sect is doing. On the other hand, Tian Hao was a careful person. After listening to Tianyang's plan, he revealed a worried expression. But won't Ling Long's Heavenly Spirit clan find Heavenly Cloud Continent? If we go back to Heavenly Cloud Continent and the Heavenly Spirit clan comes after us, Wuzun alone can turn Heavenly Cloud Continent upside down. Ling Long is as a spiritual grade great saint. According to what you said, she is even stronger than Xianyuan Changsheng. Heavenly Cloud Continent. What if she destroys Heavenly Cloud Continent? Tianyang smiled. Don't worry. The Heavenly Spirit clan's information comes from the Demonic Dragon Clan and the Star Demon Trading Company. In other words, the Heavenly Spirit clan knows what the Demonic Dragon Clan and the Star Demon Trading Company know. In other words, no matter how powerful Ling Long's information network is, she only knows that I'm from another world. It's impossible for her to find Heaven Continent. Hearing this, Tian Hao heaved a sigh of relief. If that's the case, going back isn't a bad choice. Speaking of which, I abandoned the Tian family to chase after your mother when you were 8 years old. I don't even know if the Tian family is still around. On the other hand, Xianyuan Qingming's face revealed a look of nostalgia. When I first met your father, it was in the demonic Beast Mountain range of the Arctic Empire. Before Tianyang could ask, Yin Xianyuan said, Ling Long's siren knows that I'm with you. If I stay in the Xiantian Great Cosmos and she finds out, she will capture me to threaten you. So, I'll go back with you, Yin Xianyuan said faintly. Although his tone was flat, it carried a kind of unyielding determination. Seeing this, Tianyang could only be speechless. It doesn't matter if you want to go with me. Tianyang was also puzzled. 2 years ago, Saint Xianyuan was so eager to kill him. Why was she now like a sticky candy that he could not shake off? The demon slave mark had been removed for a long time. What did he have that she still wanted? Could it be that this woman was still waiting for an opportunity to kill him? For a moment, Tianyang was speechless. With Xianyuan Yun's current strength, she wouldn't even be able to harm a single strand of his hair if she were to hit him while he was sleeping. However, since she insisted on going, Tianyang could not force her to go. After all, Yin Xuanyuan's words made sense. The Heavenly Spirit clan could not even capture the powerful Dragon Emperor. Their whereabouts were mysterious. If Yin Xianyuan was left alone, she might really be in danger. Then let's go. Tianyang smiled slightly, and the tyrannical spiritual grade, Great Saint's true origin burst out. Please bear with it for a while. Tianyang smiled and opened the space door to the Vientiane sky ruins. I didn't expect that after so many years away from Heaven Continent, we would still have a day to go back. Tian Hao sighed. Then Tian Hao, Xianyuan Qingming, Ling Yuhan, and Yun Xianyuan all entered the Vientiane Sky ruins. Tianyang also strengthened the Vientiane Sky ruins and soared into the sky, shattering the void. With Tianyang's current cultivation, shattering the void and coming out of the world was not difficult. In just an instant, Tianyang broke through the world barrier of the Xiantian Great World and arrived in the starry sky. I can break this spatial turbulence with a wave of my hand. Tianyang smiled as he looked at the trembling spatial turbulence around him. It was like weak little worms. When he first came to Wuzun, he was severely injured after passing through the spatial turbulence, and his cultivation had fallen to the heavenly ascension realm. When he went to find the great Lord of Heaven and avenge Shintian Wuzun, he could only ignore it. Now, Tianyang only needed to use a little force, and the spatial turbulence would automatically disappear. Forget it, this Xiantian Great World already has it. I'd better not touch it. Tianyang smiled and shook his head. He quickly determined his position. The path he took when he came here appeared clearly in his mind. His true origin erupted, and he used the seventh change of the heavenly expanse 9 changes. Tianyang's figure disappeared and flew in the direction of the Tianshao Great World. Outside the Tianshao Great World, after a 4-day journey and repositioning, Tianyang finally arrived at the Tianshao Great World. Whether it was in his previous life or in this life, this was his hometown, Heaven Continent. I'm finally back. Tianyang was excited, but there was a trace of doubt on his face. Speaking of which, why do I feel like something's not quite right? However, Tianyang did not care much. In a flash, he flew into the Tianshao Great World. Green mountains, clear water, small cities, ordinary people. Tianyang immediately locked onto the northern wilderness region. However, whether it was the Arctic state or not, Tianyang was not sure. After all, with the Blood Sea removed, the Tianshao Great World must have changed greatly. I can't tell where this is, but I should know where the Arctic state is. Tianyang looked around and then released the power of his primordial spirit to sense. However, in the next second, he was stunned. Chapter 1439. Tianyang could not believe his eyes as he sensed his surroundings. He was stunned. When he was outside Heaven Continent, he did not feel anything. He only felt that the Tianshao Great World was different from what he remembered. But now, since when did Heaven Continent become like the Xiantian Great World, with spiritual ocean realm cultivators and heaven-reaching realm cultivators everywhere? Even with Tianyang's willpower, he was still a little stunned at this moment. Wasn't this a little too strong? His primordial spirit power had not spread far, only covering a few hundred miles. However, there were 3 spiritual ocean realm cultivators and 1 heaven-reaching realm cultivator within this few hundred miles. Even before Tianyang left, there were not so many heaven-reaching realm cultivators in Heaven Continent who had recovered and fought against the extraterritorial demons together. Back then, an existence at the level of the old Dragon King was already a top-notch expert. Now, Tianyang had confirmed it countless times before he was finally able to confirm it. He did not go to the wrong place. This was the northern wilderness region, one of the countless wilderness regions. Speaking of which, there's something wrong with the heaven and earth spiritual energy in Heaven Continent. The heaven and earth spiritual energy in the past was not even 1% of what it is now. After experiencing the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the Xiantian Great World, Tianyang was extremely sensitive to it. He could immediately see the changes in the heaven and earth spiritual energy in Heaven Continent. In the past, the highest cultivation level in Heaven Continent was the heaven-reaching realm. Any higher, and they would have to break through the void and go to other worlds. Now, the northern wilderness region was about half the size of the East Sea State in Jiangbei City, not to mention the heaven and earth spiritual energy in Heaven Continent. However, since this is indeed Heaven Continent, I can let Yuhan and the rest out. Tianyang muttered to himself. Then, he stretched out his hand and opened the space crack that led to the Vientiane Sky Market. Ling Yuhan and the rest who had been waiting in the Vientiane Sky Market for a long time rushed out when they saw the space crack open. Wow, Master, we're really back. The moment Ling Yuhan came out, he looked around in surprise and said, She recognized them faster than Tianyang. How did you recognize us so quickly? Aren't you afraid that I'll lead you the wrong way? Seeing this, Tianyang said in surprise. Hearing this, Ling Yuhan smiled proudly. Do you think I don't know where this is? It's just a nameless mountain range a few thousand miles away from the northern wilderness region. It's only a few hundred miles away from the soaring cloud sect. Master, don't underestimate me just because I'm not strong enough. I might be more familiar with the heaven continent than you are. Ling Yuhan said proudly. You should know that I was the commander-in-chief of the demon camp in the demon resistance army. As the last base, of course, I have to investigate the surroundings of the northern wilderness. Ling Yuhan was extremely proud, and Tianyang nodded in agreement. In his previous life, he had spent most of his time in the central and southern regions of the continent. He would not come to a place like the northern wilderness, where the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was scarce, unless absolutely necessary. It was normal for the northern wilderness region to be inferior to Ling Yuhan. I know this place. Xian Yuan Qingming looked around in surprise. When Ahao and I were traveling in the heaven continent, we passed by this place. If we fly another 1,000 miles northeast, we'll reach the Tian family in Yang Tian City. Hearing this, Tianyang's mouth twitched. Why was everyone more familiar with the heaven continent than he was? After all, he had died once in the heaven continent. Was she not going to give him some face? Then let's go back to the Tian family to have a look. After so many years, I wonder how the Tian family has developed. Maybe there are a few people who have awakened the immortal bloodline. Tian Hao chuckled. Then he held Xian Yuan Qingming's hand and flew toward Yang Tian City in the northern wilderness region's Arctic nation. Wuzun's true origin exploded. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the mountains. Suddenly, only Tianyang, Ling Yuhan, and Yin Xianyuan were left in the nameless mountain range. So this is his hometown. Yin Xianyuan reached out and plucked a leaf. It was similar to the Xiantian Great World, but she had never seen it before. For some reason, Yin Xianyuan felt a sense of joy in her heart, probably because she had come to a place where Tianyang had never been before. Yuhan, since you know the way to the soaring cloud sect, you can lead the way, Tianyang said with a smile. With the power of his primordial spirit, he could easily cover a radius of 10,000 miles and find the Lingyun sect. However, it was rare for Ling Yuhan to be so proud. Tianyang could not bear to interrupt her. Okay. This is what Master doesn't know. Oh right, Jiang Ling also said that we should go to the Soaring Clouds sect to have a look. Maybe we can see her there. Ling Yuhan smiled. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded slightly. He remembered that after Ling Yuhan was taken away by the brothers sent by the nine-tailed demon emperor, he came to Dragon Emperor City. It was there that Tianyang met Jiang Han and Jiang Ling He took Jiang Ling as his disciple on behalf of a close friend in his previous life. Of course, Jiang Ling was only taking in a disciple on behalf of her master. Tianyang did not take care of her from beginning to end like Ling Yuhan, except for giving her a cultivation method. However, with Jiang Ling's talent, she should have already stepped into the Heaven Ascension realm, or even Wuzun realm. Let's go. Master is already a spiritual grade great saint. We'll reach the Soaring Clouds sect in the blink of an eye. Ling Yuhan smiled. Tianyang nodded and let Ling Yuhan lead the way. Then he followed. Yin Xianyuan, who was immersed in her feelings, hurriedly withdrew her feelings and flew over. You old man, you're almost 70 or 80 years old. Why haven't you broken through to the Heaven Ascension realm? You're the sect leader of the Soaring Cloud sect. How can the sect leader of the Soaring Cloud sect be such a good-for-nothing? Mockery rang in the ears of an old man. Hearing this, the corners of the old man's mouth curled into a wry smile. Back then, the old sect leader was more than 100 years old. It's fine that he hasn't broken through to the Heaven Ascension realm, but what about you? You're so old, yet you're still not in the Heaven Ascension realm. In this great era of spirit chi recovery, you're a burden. Don't talk about it. The previous sect leader was only in his 40s. He's far from being 70 or 80 years old. It's all because of the Demon Emperor when he went to fight the Demon Emperor alone during the catastrophe. He suffered from a hidden illness. Even the leader of Tianyang couldn't solve it. Haha, fighting the demon emperor alone? Isn't that just courting death? Tianyang's leader? So what if he's the leader of Tianyang? He might have already died in another world. How could it be safer than us in the Heaven Ascension realm, where Spirit Chi has recovered? That person mocked. Hearing this, the old man coughed and laughed bitterly. Then, he stood up and left with his body hunched. This kind of good-for-nothing should hurry up and get out of the soaring cloud sect. The young voice sneered. At this moment, Tianyang's group of 3 had arrived at the soaring cloud sect's mountain gate. Tianyang smiled faintly and walked up to the old man. Sir, may I trouble you to ask? The old man raised his head, his pupils constricting. Tianyang's entire body shook as he cried out involuntarily in shock. Chapter 1440. Yi Zhanling, Tianyang said in disbelief. Although Yi Zhanling looked like he was in his 70s or 80s, his hair was white, and his face was haggard. He no longer looked like the heroic Soaring Cloud sect's inner-sect senior brother and the Soaring Cloud sect's sect master. However, Tianyang could still recognize Yi Zhanling's chi. Although he was old and weak, his chi would never change. Tianyang. Yi Zhanling's face was filled with disbelief. He then looked to the side and said in shock, Ling Yuhan, you're back. Yi Zhanling said in disbelief. Tianyang and Ling Yuhan had left for many years. If it wasn't for the fact that all the forces that existed before the Demon Emperor's calamity and survived the Demon Emperor's calamity had erected a statue of Tianyang, Yi Zhanling would have almost forgotten about the savior who shone brightly in Heaven's continent. Yi Zhanling couldn't help but cry when he recalled how he had stood up to stop the Demon Emperor's attack on Heaven's continent's anti-demon alliance and was saved by Tianyang. Don't talk. Don't move. Let me check. Tianyang frowned. Then, he placed one hand on Yi Zhanling's shoulder, and a gentle true origin was injected into Yi Zhanling's body. It was fine if he didn't look. However, once he looked, Tianyang's face turned ugly. The Demon Emperor's demon chi is actually so vicious? It only took a year for it to completely break out. Tianyang's face turned ugly. Yi Zhanling's current appearance was shockingly old. The culprit was actually the Demon Emperor that Tianyang had killed a few years ago. The Demon Emperor's gifted divine ability seemed to be different from the ordinary demon clan. After Tianyang had saved Yi Zhanling's demon chi, it didn't disappear. Instead, it hid itself and only broke out a year later. Therefore, Yi Zhanling's life force was eroded by the demonic chi, and he turned into the appearance of this old man. Not only did his appearance age, but his life force and veritable essence energy also weakened as the demonic chi corroded his body. Although Yi Zhanling still had the true origin of the Sea of Spirit Realm, the current Yi Zhanling could easily kill an ordinary origin transformation cultivator. As expected of the otherworldly demons, their methods are truly vicious. When Tianyang saved Yi Zhanling, he was only in the reaching heaven state. After breaking through, Wu Zun did not continue to pay attention to Yi Zhanling. Only now did he realize it. Fortunately, I refined some pills in advance. Otherwise, you would have collapsed under the impact of a spirit-grade Great Sage's True Yuan. Tianyang sighed and opened his interspatial bag. A pure green pill that emitted vitality appeared in his hand. At this time, Yi Zhanling finally had the chance to speak. He trembled and said, Tianyang, why did you come back? Hearing this incomparably old voice, not only did Tianyang's face turn ugly, Ling Yuhan also revealed a look of reluctance. I came back when I wanted to. Tianyang smiled and said, let's not talk about it first. Eat this pill first. Then, Tianyang flicked his finger and the pill entered Yi Zhanling's mouth. This pill was the mildest pill that Tianyang had refined. Although the effect was not strong, it was just right for a Sea of Spirit Realm cultivator like Yi Zhanling. Yi Zhanling also had absolute trust in Tianyang. Without saying anything, he swallowed it. The medicinal effect slowly spread. Not long after, Yi Zhanling's body underwent a great change. His withered skin seemed to have returned to its original rosy color, as if time had reversed. Streams of demonic chi were expelled from his body. The aura of his body also became stronger. I thought that you left to sweep the floor. In the end, you sat at the entrance and blocked the road? At this time, a young and arrogant voice rang out. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. How many other suspicious people are there? Old Man Yi, Old Man Yi, you're still the former sect leader of the Lingyun sect. Once you've been abandoned, you don't even have this bit of awareness? The young figure sneered. Tianyong slowly raised his head and frowned. Yi Zhanling was still the sect leader of the Lingyun sect. Even if he was poisoned and his strength regressed, the Lingyun sect should still have the most basic respect. Then Tianyong and the young figure looked at each other. Io, you're still young. I didn't think that you, Old Man Yi, would still have the energy to wither away your pretty face even though you're already 70 or 80 years old. The former sect leader of the Lingyun sect, now. Sigh. The young figure sneered. In the next moment, the young figure's body trembled as he stared at Tianyong. No, why does this face look a bit familiar? Come down, Tianyong said indifferently. With his hundreds of years of experience, although he didn't know what had happened, he could roughly guess what had happened. Tianyong. At this time, the young figure's pupils constricted as he said in shock. I didn't expect that just as I said that Tianyong would be trash, Tianyong would come. It seems that I really am blessed by luck, huh? The heavens bless me, Yang Tian Fan. The young figure laughed wildly, while Tianyong frowned slightly and said indifferently, Come down. Soon after, a wave of air at the peak of the Heaven Ascension realm was released. Although he was extremely displeased with this Yang Tian Fan in front of him, he was still a member of the Lingyun sect. Tianyong didn't want to hurt him. At this time, sensing the level of the wave of air, Yang Tian Fan's expression didn't change as he sneered, Air frozen bead. In the next moment, Yang Tian Fan held an azure orb in his hand and stood firmly in the middle of the Heaven Ascension realm's wave of air. Ha ha ha. This air-frozen bead could maintain stability in the wind below the third level of the Wuzun realm. In other words, after leaving for a few years, Tianyong's strength was not even at the third level of the Wuzun realm. I was right, Tianyong left the Tianshao Great World. He's not even a piece of trash. Yang Tian Fan laughed loudly. At this time, Tianyong frowned slightly. The pressure of the peak of the Wuzun realm erupted. In an instant, the air-frozen bead in Yang Tian Fan's hand shattered, and his entire body was directly brought in front of Tianyong by Tianyong. My air-frozen bead, Yang Tian Fan roared in pain, and then looked at Tianyong with a face full of anger. You trash. You actually dare to destroy my air-frozen bead. Hearing this, Tianyong's expression did not change as he made his move. A strand of true essence appeared on Yang Tian Fan's neck. If you don't want to die, shut up, Tianyong said indifferently. In his eyes, there was a rare trace of anger. What happened to the Lingyun sect in the years that he wasn't here? You actually dare to threaten me? My big brother is the sect master of the Lingyun sect. Wuzun is a super expert at the 7th level of the realm. Yang Tian Fan roared, and at this time, Tianyong's voice spread out. Lingyun sect, everyone. Get out here. Chapter 1441. Get out here. Tianyong roared angrily, and the aura of a spiritual grade, Great Saint erupted, covering the entire soaring cloud sect. Although this aura was huge, it was not enough to hurt people. It was only an aura, and there was no pressure at all. Tianyong was really angry about the soaring cloud sect now. You actually asked everyone in the soaring cloud sect to get out here? Hearing this, Yang Tian Fan's expression changed instantly, and he said in disbelief, Do you know what you are doing? You should know that you are provoking the soaring cloud sect, one of the top 5 forces in the heaven continent. I'm the one who brought the soaring cloud sect to prominence. So what if I provoke the entire sect? Tianyong said coldly, and in the next moment, countless elders suddenly flew down from the mountain gate of the soaring cloud sect. In the middle of the countless elders, a young man with a face full of anger rushed over at lightning speed. Which powerhouse dares to provoke the soaring cloud sect? Don't you know that the soaring cloud sect is protected by the dragon clan, the demon clan, and the entire human clan? Even if you are stronger than me, it is not a reason for you to be presumptuous in front of the soaring cloud sect. Big brother. Seeing this, Yang Tian Fan was immediately ecstatic. Hurry up. Kill Tianyong, this trash. Seeing this, Tianyong smiled faintly. It seemed that although the Tianshao Great World had changed greatly, there had never been a saint stage. The power of the Great Path origin and his aura could be seen by anyone who had cultivated a trace of the saint stage. However, the people of the Soaring Cloud sect only knew that a powerhouse had arrived. Tianyang glanced at the group of elders indifferently, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a slight smile. It seemed that the recovery of the spiritual qi in the Tianshao Great World was not weak. These 5 were probably elders, and they were all around the first or second level of the Wuzun realm. The young man in the middle, who looked like the current Soaring Cloud sect leader, was Wuzun realm, 5th level. One Wuzun could look down on the entire Jiangbei city, and there was more than one Wuzun realm in a place where the spiritual qi of heaven and earth was only half of Jiangbei city. Although it was because of the Soaring Cloud sect status in the heaven continent, Tianyang's eyes still showed a look of praise. Then his face became cold. Brother Wang, brother Wang, this guy is Tianyang. He doesn't take you seriously. At this moment, young Tian Fan, who had been captured by Tianyang, suddenly shouted. Moreover, he broke the air-frozen bead that Brother Wang gave him. What? Tianyang. Upon hearing this, the Soaring Cloud sect leader, who was addressed as Brother Wang by Yang Tianfan, had a slight change in expression as he glared at Tianyang. When Tianyang broke through to the Dao Fire realm, he was only in his teens. Once he stepped into the Dao Fire realm, the aging of his body would slow down. When Tianyang stepped into the Wuzun realm and left the heaven continent, he was only around 20 years old. As Tianyang's cultivation improved, he broke through to the peak of the Wuzun realm, the Sage realm, and the Great Sage realm. His appearance also became younger. For a moment, whether it was the Soaring Cloud sect leader, Brother Wang, or the other elders of the Soaring Cloud sect, none of them recognized Tianyang. However, after the Soaring Cloud sect leader's expression changed slightly, it became cold. Tianyang? He's just a swindler with the appearance of the Tianyang alliance leader. Men, take him down. The Soaring Cloud sect leader shouted coldly. Hearing this, young Tian Fan was stunned. Swindler? How could an ordinary swindler have such strength? To be able to make Yi Zhanling trust him so much? However, in the next moment, Yang Tian Fan reacted. Whether or not Tianyang was a swindler was no longer important. The most important thing was that the position of the Soaring Cloud sect leader could not be lost and could not be shaken by anyone. Regardless of Tianyang's current strength, he was still the savior who had saved the entire Tianshao Great World. If he were to become enemies with Tianyang, then no matter how good the Soaring Cloud sect leader was, he would definitely be condemned by the world. Therefore, the Soaring Cloud sect leader gave the order to capture Tianyang. Yang Tianfan, who had always been arrogant and overbearing, was able to react quickly, let alone the group of elders of the Soaring Cloud sect who were old and experienced. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying and powerful true essence of the Wuzun realm erupted. These elders attacked at the same time, and the power of their martial spirits erupted. Sword wind destroying the heavens. Unparalleled dragon fist. Cold rain wind sword. Zhuemo fist technique. In an instant, 5 elders of the Soaring Cloud sect attacked at the same time, attacking Tianyang together. They even released various martial techniques that were compatible with their martial spirits. As soon as they attacked, they exploded with a sure kill attack. Seeing this, the Soaring Cloud sect leader sneered. So what if he was Tianyang? Regardless of whether he was real or fake, now, in front of Wang Chong, he was just an ant. At this moment, Tianyang moved. Of course, he did not defend against the attacks of these elders who were only at the first or second tier of the Wuzun realm. Instead, he turned around. He directly crushed Yang Tianfan's head, and those attacks were directly shattered by the protective true essence around Tianyang's body. Pwah! The 5 elders' attacks were broken, and they immediately spat out a large mouthful of blood, and their entire bodies flew backward. In the heaven continent, Wuzun realm experts who could look down on the world and become the overlord of 100 territories multiplied by 5 were instantly killed by Tianyang. Seeing this, the Soaring Cloud sect leader instantly widened his eyes. However, it was not because the 5 Wuzun realm elders could not even get within 10 meters of Tianyang. It was because of young Tian Fan's death. Fan! Wang Chong, the soaring cloud sect leader, roared angrily, and the true essence of Wuzun Realm Tier 5 erupted. Tianyang, you are a disciple of the soaring cloud sect. How dare you kill the elders of the soaring cloud sect and kill the most talented deacon in front of the soaring cloud sect? In your eyes, do you still have the soaring cloud sect? Do you still have me, the soaring cloud sect leader? Do you still have a heaven continent? Wang Chong roared angrily, and clouds gradually appeared around him. This was his martial soul, a low-grade heaven-class martial soul, soaring cloud. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled and glanced at Yi Zhanling, who was in the midst of repairing and was about to complete it. In my eyes, there is Li Lingyun, Yi Zhanling, Yang Xiong, Lu Hanqi, and even Yang Xiao. Who do you think you are? Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, Wang Chong's face instantly became extremely furious, and the veins on his forehead bulged as he roared. I'll kill you. Ever since he entered the Soaring Cloud sect and displayed his amazing talent, no one had ever dared to speak to him like this. Soaring Cloud Divine Sword. Heaven and earth break. A light flashed in Wang Chong's hand, and a supreme-grade spirit weapon longsword appeared in his hand. Wisps of terrifying auras burst out from the ground. Die! Wang Chong roared. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled. The pressure was no longer suppressed. Boom! Wang Chong's figure in the air was instantly suppressed by the pressure of a spirit-grade great saint. He landed on the ground. Chapter 1442. In an instant, Lingyun School's current leader, Wang Chong, died. Compared to the Lingyun School's elders, he was even more unbearable. He was still half a step away from Tianyang, roughly 500 meters. He was directly crushed by Tianyang. And at this time, Yi Zhanling had finally finished absorbing all of the medicinal power of the pill, and the aura of his body abruptly withdrew. In the next moment, a soaring pillar exploded out. Boom! Within the pillar of qi, Yi Zhanling slowly stood up, completely different from his old and frail appearance from before. The current Yi Zhanling had not only returned to normal, he was handsome and had a threatening aura. Moreover, a powerful aura was being emitted from Yi Zhanling's body. It was the peak of the 9th level of the Sea of Soul Realm. He had directly broken through several levels. As long as I am prepared, even without accumulating, I can easily break through to the Heaven Ascension Realm. The pillar of qi slowly dissipated, and Yi Zhanling's face was filled with disbelief as he looked at Tianyang. A single pill had expelled all of the demonic aura, allowing him to regain his vitality and his cultivation to rise to another level. Yi Zhanling even felt that his martial spirit and talent had both risen. Compared to before, it was on a completely different level. Of course, Tianyang faintly smiled. Although that pill could be said to be the weakest among all of the pills that Tianyang had refined. But that was only relative. No matter how weak a saint-grade pill was, it was still a saint-grade pill. If Tianyang shifted the focus of his cultivation to alchemy, not to mention saint-grade pills, even a saint-grade pill could be refined for Yi Zhanling. Of course, whether Yi Zhanling could eat it or not, that was another matter altogether. Your strength, what level has it reached? Yi Zhanling looked at Tianyang with incomparable shock, as if he could no longer see through him. No, it would be better to say that from the beginning, he could not see through Tianyang at all. Only, although the Tianyang at that time felt mysterious and powerful, they were still in the same world. The current Tianyang, although standing in front of him alive, seemed to be able to transcend everything and step into another world at any time. The Tianxiao Great World should be an unimaginable realm. Tianyang chuckled. It was only then that Yi Zhanling noticed the situation around him. Yi Zhanling was puzzled. Then, his pupils shrunk as he looked at everything in front of him in disbelief. Yang Tianfan was dead. The meat paste that was halfway up the stairs had a piece of the sect master's robe. In the distance, the 5 elders vomited blood and were motionless. You killed Yang Tianfan and Wang Chong, Yi Zhanling said in disbelief. Hearing this, Tianyang shrugged his shoulders. 2 pieces of trash. If they die, then they die. Anyone who saw how Tianyong had sent 5 elders flying without even moving and connected it to the pressure of an expert from before should know that Tianyong was no match for Wang Chong. Yet, this Wang Chong was still courting death, charging over like a moth darting into a flame. Tianyong said that he had no other choice. He was also in despair, so he killed Wang Chong instantly. Trash! Hearing this, Yi Zhanling's mouth twitched. Wang Chong was only 2,000 years old, but he had stepped into Wu Zun Realm Tier 5. He could be said to be the strongest genius since the recovery of spiritual energy in Tianshao Great World. Even the next 1,000 years, there might not be anyone who could surpass him. Although Yang Tianfan was slightly weaker, he had also reached the peak of the Heaven Ascension realm when he was 1,000 years old. Even the nine-tailed Demon Emperor and the old Dragon King before the recovery of spiritual energy in Tianshao Great World were far inferior to him. These two peerless geniuses of Tianshao Great World were called trash by Tianyong. In fact, it was almost the same. After seeing the terrifying talent of sword godling Tianyong even felt that his own talent was just so. Wang Chong and Yang Tianfan were both over 1,000 years old, but they had not broken through to the half-saint realm. They were extremely weak. Not to mention the Void Mountain Shao Zun, Vajra Arhat, and Bodhi Bodhisattva, who were all peerless geniuses in the Xiantian Great World. Lan Ji could even easily kill the yellow dragon of the true dragon sacred world. It would be better to say that any disciple of a decent sect in the Xiantian Great World could easily kill Wang Chong and Yang Tianfan. If the Tianshao Great World wanted to become a world where martial arts flourished like the Xiantian Great World, there was still a long way to go. Tianyong sighed. At this moment, a thunderous roar suddenly sounded. Who? Who killed Yang Tianfan and the sect master? Who? In the next moment, the aura of Wu Zun Realm Tier 8 erupted. Tianyong casually raised his head and saw an old man in the sky. That's the strongest of the experts still active in Tianshao Great World, Yang Tian. Yi Zhanling's voice was trembling as he stared at the old man in the sky. Hearing this, Tianyong was slightly taken aback. The strongest of the experts, Wu Zun Realm Tier 8? In the next moment, Yang Tian looked down. Yi Zhanling. Yang Tian's expression froze for a moment before he charged down furiously. Since you're here, do you know how Yang Tianfan and Wang Chong died? Yang Tian frowned. Tianyong glanced at the elders of Wu Zun Realm Tier 1 and Tier 2. You can still send messages? It seems that I underestimated Wu Zun Realm Tier 1 and Tier 2. Yang Tian was taken aback. Tianyong glanced at Yang Tian and smiled. I killed him. What? Do you have a problem with that? Tianyong smiled faintly. Hearing this, Yang Tian flew into a rage and turned to look at Tianyong. How dare you, Lord Tianyong? Just as Yang Tian roared, his entire body trembled as he stared at Tianyong. In the next moment, boom, kneeling on the ground, Yang Tian, commander of the Northern Army of the Human Race of the Anti-Demon Alliance, greets Lord Tianyong. Yang Tian's voice trembled as he roared. Hearing this, Tianyong was stunned. He thought that he was going to play with this group of Wu Zun Realm kids again. In the end, this guy knelt down before they even started fighting. You know me. Tianyong was puzzled. In his memory, there was no such person as Yang Tian. When Lord Tianyong led the human race army into the Sea of Blood, I was one of the commanders of the human race army. My battle record was not eye-catching. I could only look up at Lord Tianyong's heroic figure from afar. It's normal that Lord Tianyong doesn't remember me. Yang Tian said respectfully. Hearing this, Tianyong smiled. So that's how it is. Then, can I explain that you're trying to get rid of your relationship with Yang Tianfan and Wang Chong? Yang Tianfan and Wang Chong? Hearing this, Yang Tian was stunned. What about them? Don't you know about Yi Zhanling's situation? Tianyong was stunned and said, I'm in seclusion all year round. I'm not very enthusiastic about managing the affairs of the Soaring Cloud sect. Hearing this, Yang Tian was a little embarrassed. Yi Zhanling also said, Yang Tian has indeed been in seclusion all this time. It's understandable that he doesn't know about the situation. Oh, Tianyong nodded, then turned and flew towards the Soaring Cloud sect. Got it. Chapter 1443. Wang Chong and Yang Tian were indeed killed by me. Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, Yang Tian was also stunned. Then, he was completely dumbfounded. That, Lord Tianyang, this joke isn't good. It seems like you really don't know about Yi Zhongling. Hearing this, Tianyang shrugged and didn't care too much. Since Yang Tian didn't know, Tianyang didn't have the obligation to explain. This Lingyun sect had become Wang Chong's. Although Yang Tian had been in closed-door cultivation all this time, it was more or less his responsibility to completely ignore it. However, these were Yi Zhongling's own matters, and Tianyang didn't have the leisure to care about them. Oh, Lingyun sect, inner sect, sect master's mansion. I haven't entered the sect master's mansion even once. Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, Yang Tian also felt awkward. Although Tianyang was from the Lingyun sect, relying on this relationship, the Lingyun sect had become one of the top 10 forces in the Tianshao Great World, the most powerful force in the northern wilderness region and its surrounding areas. However, the relationship between Tianyang and the Lingyun sect might not be that deep. However, as you wish, I just came back and don't know anything. Who can explain it to me? Tianyang chuckled. Hearing this, Yang Tian heaved a sigh of relief. From a simple description that Yi Zhongling gave to Yang Tian could also see what kind of stupid thing Wang Chong and Yang Tian had done to be killed by Tianyang. Fortunately, the two of them were already dead, and Yi Zhongling, as the person involved, didn't have any intention of pursuing Yang Tian, so Tianyang didn't kill him as well. Previously, he was in deep closed-door cultivation. In other words, even if there were emergency messages from those elders, it would be impossible for Yang Tian to wake up so easily and arrive in time. It was the pressure of the spirit grade Great Saint Realm that Tianyang had released earlier. Immediately, everyone in the Soaring Cloud sect woke up from their stupor. Then I'll leave first. I just broke through to the peak of the Spirit Sea Realm, and I still plan to consolidate my cultivation before breaking through to the Heaven Ascension Realm. Yi Zhongling laughed. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded. On the other hand, Yang Tian froze for a second. How many years had it been? Yi Zhongling had already reached the peak of the spirit realm? He seemed to remember that although Yi Zhongling's strength had improved greatly after the Devil Emperor calamity, he had reached the Sea of Soul Realm. But not long after, yes, because of the Devil's Demon Chi's demonic chi, Yizes but now, he directly leapt directly to's? Could it be Heavenly Sun? In Yang Tian's heart, the Heavenly Sun was shrouded in a mysterious veil. Tianyang, on the other hand, was too lazy to care. He tapped his finger on the table and chuckled. Then why don't you introduce me? Hearing this, Yang Tian seemed to wake up from a dream and hurriedly explained. Tianyang also understood the current situation of the Tianshao Great World. In the 3 years after the Demon Emperor's calamity, Tianyang devoured the Blood Sea. Under the leadership of the old Dragon King, the nine-tailed Demon Emperor, and Li Tianshun, the Heaven Continent was also constantly rebuilding. And 3 years later, when Tianyang left, because of the concerted efforts of countless powerhouses, the Tianshao Great World had recovered about 30%. In the next 2 years, it had recovered to 60% before the calamity. And in these 2 years, 5 years after Tianyang solved the Demon Emperor's calamity, an unforeseen event occurred. The heaven and earth spiritual chi of the Tianshao Great World, with the central region as the center, suddenly skyrocketed. Originally, all the heaven and earth spiritual chi in the world came from the central region, and then it spread to the entire Tianshao Great World. However, although the heaven and earth spiritual chi explosion this time was centered in the central region, the entire Tianshao Great World had heaven and earth spiritual chi explosion points. Coincidentally, the northern wilderness was at one of the points. In the past 5 years, the Lingyun sect had borrowed Tianyang's power to absorb many powerhouses, but Yi Zhongling was still the leader. However, after the heaven and earth spiritual chi explosion, Wang Chong and Yang Tian Fan's cultivation suddenly skyrocketed, and Yi Zhongling's cultivation just happened to drop. Thus, Wang Chong became the Lingyun sect's sect master, and Yang Tian Fan became the chief deacon. Although he was a deacon, with Wang Chang's relationship, he could even order around the elders. Then Tianyang came. When Sect Master Yi's demonic energy exploded and needed a long time to heal so that he would not die, Lord Tianyang, your second disciple, Jiang Shui'er, also came back and became the Lingyun sect's sect master for a period of time. It was because of Sect Master Zhang's support that Sect Master Yi was not immediately forced to abdicate by Wang Chong and Yang Tianfan. However, not long after, Sect Master Jiang broke through to the Wuzun realm and left the Tianshao Great World. If Lord Tianyang came a year earlier, Sect Master Jiang would still be in seclusion in the Land of Ice in the extreme north. If you came, Sect Master Jiang would be very happy to know, Yang Tian said. Hearing this, Tianyang was a little surprised. He always knew that Jiang Shui'er's icy heaven spiritual body was extraordinary and that it was only a matter of time before she broke through to the Wuzun realm. However, he did not expect that she would break through to the Wuzun realm so quickly. Although it was because of the spiritual energy explosion in the Tianshao Great World, Jiang Shui's talent was on the same level as Bodhi Bodhisattva, Vajra Bodhisattva, and Shao Zun of the Void Mountain, even in the Xintian Great World. This Tianshao Great World is really strange. Tianyang smiled. He now had a better understanding of the Tianshao Great World situation. Speaking of which, what about the old Dragon King and the nine-tailed Demon Emperor? Don't tell me they also left the Tianshao Great World? Tianyang asked. If that was the case, Tianyang's return to the Tianshao Great World would be meaningless. No. Although the old Dragon King and the nine-tailed Demon Emperor broke through to the Wuzun realm in the third year of the spiritual energy explosion, they did not leave the Tianshao Great World and have been guarding it. Now, the old Dragon King should be in seclusion in the deep sea, and the nine-tailed Demon Emperor should still be in the wasteland demon realm. I'm not sure, Yang Tian said. However, before they went into seclusion, they had already surpassed me. Hearing this, Tianyang was stunned. They had already surpassed Yang Tian. Did that mean that the old Dragon King and the nine-tailed Demon Emperor had already reached the Wuzun realm? My father is a peerless genius. Even Ling Yuhan was shocked. Until now, she was only at the peak of the advanced sage realm. The nine-tailed Demon Emperor did not have the nine-tailed Moon Fox bloodline, the Nine Nether Saint body, or a peerless cultivation technique like the Nine Nether Frost technique. How could she improve so quickly? What's the situation in the Lingyun sect now? Tianyang asked. He did not want the Lingyun sect to change completely under Wang Chong's control. Other than the elders, the others have nothing to do with Wang Chong, Yang Tian said. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded. Of course, he would not believe everything. After all, what Yang Tian knew might not be true. However, he could sense with his primordial spirit. All right then. Chapter 1444. Give a sermon. Hearing this, Yang Tian was stunned. Then his pupils dilated, and his entire body trembled with excitement. Lord Tianyang, you want to give a sermon? Yang Tian trembled in disbelief. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled slightly. Yes. However, you can also let people from other forces participate, as long as they don't have a grudge against me. Invite the Dragon Clan, the Wasteland Demon Realm, and the Stars Swordplay Sect. In that case, there won't be enough time tomorrow. Let's do it 5 days later. Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, Yang Tian immediately stood up excitedly. Yes. Giving a sermon was a term that could only be used by people whose strength far exceeded that of ordinary cultivators. In the current Tianshao Great World, those who dared to use these words were at least experts above the 5th level of Wuzun realm. However, Yang Tian couldn't see through Tianyang at all, as if Tianyang was immortal. However, Yang Tian also understood. Tianyang's strength definitely surpassed all the cultivators in the Tianshao Great World. If he were to give a sermon, the entire Tianshao Great World would definitely swarm over. I wonder what realm Lord Tianyang is in now. In Yang Tian's perception, Tianyang was like a bottomless black hole, and he couldn't see through his cultivation at all. He only knew that he was strong, so strong that he couldn't resist at all. Spirit grade great saint. Tianyang smiled slightly. Seeing Yang Tian's puzzled face, he added, "If I use my full strength, Tianshao continent should be destroyed." Yang Tian was dumbfounded. After a long while, Yang Tian stood up stiffly and walked out, preparing to contact the major powers of the Tianshao Great World. At the side, Ling Yuhan giggled. Master really likes to scare people. In fact, Skycloud Continent was only 20 to 30% larger than the central divine prefecture of the arcane Great World. Tianyang did not have a spirit-grade great saint, but Tianyang's sword was enough to destroy the entire divine central continent. Now that he had a spirit-grade great saint, it was possible that he could destroy the entire Xintian Great World. Of course, if he wanted to destroy the entire Xintian Great World, he would have to do so. Even sage emperors would find it difficult to accomplish such a feat. At the very least, one would have to be a god realm cultivator. Then, let's go to the Arctic state and take a look. Li Lingyun had also broken through to the Spirit Sea realm. However, Tianyang did not plan to visit him. Li Lingyun had probably seen the current state of the Soaring Cloud sect and decided to cultivate in seclusion. However, Tianyang had asked Yang Tian to invite him as well. After that, Tianyang went to the Arctic state. The Myriad Drug Pavilion outside the Monster Beast Mountain Range. The pool in the Monster Beast Mountain Range where Xiaohong's descendant used to heal, Yin City, Yang Tian City, Snow Wind King City, and the place where he fought the Blood Demon King Suemo before. Most of Tianyang's memories of the northern wilderness region took place here. Although it was only 20 to 30 years ago, Tianyang still felt emotional. 20 to 30 years ago, it was already equivalent to 1/10 of his previous life. The Tian family was very surprised by Tian Hao's return. However, Tian Hao concealed his strength and did not let the Tian family immediately cultivate the martial arts skills of the Xintian Great World. As for the immortal bloodline that Tian Hao wanted, it naturally did not exist. Even Tianyang's immortal bloodline was only activated after he had awakened the immortal will through a series of life and death battles, let alone the other Tian family members who had not been through life and death battles. If he had not cultivated the immortal blood, Tianyang's immortal bloodline concentration would have been pitifully low. It was completely different from Tian Hao's sudden increase in immortal bloodline concentration. Tian Hao was deeply regretful about this, but he did not care too much. It was almost impossible for the immortal bloodline left behind by the immortal heavenly lord in the Archean era to be awakened after countless years. According to the records of the Tian family's ancestors, the Tian family was the main bloodline of the immortal heavenly lord. As for the immortal imperial court in the divine realm, Tianyang did not know. 5 days passed in a flash. Tianyang and the other two also toured the entire Tianshao Great World. Of course, they did not alarm anyone. Sky Blue College's Qian Shengxian had already abdicated and was now wandering the world. No one knew where he had gone. The current dean was Zhou Ling, the eldest senior sister of the 10th Palace's Lolita. She was already at LV4 of the Heaven Ascension realm. Considering her age, it would not be a problem for her to break through to the Wuzun realm in her lifetime. The arrogant and overbearing Yu Liangchen had changed his cultivation method after listening to Tianyang's words. He was already half a step into the Heaven Ascension realm and was known as the King of Power. Flying Sword had improved the Dark Heaven Blade scripture of the Dark Heaven Blade Emperor, making it more compatible with his Heavenly Blade constitution. Now, Flying Sword was the Vice Dean of Sky Blue College, LV3 of the Heaven Ascension realm. Zhou Tong of the Star Swordplay sect had also reached LV3 of the Wuzun realm. The Star Swordplay sect had gone from being a small sect that was about to be destroyed by the Purple Sun sect to being the 9th most powerful force in the entire Tianshao Great World. Sun Moon City was also changing rapidly. Jun Tianyi was getting old. Even in the era of the Spirit Chi explosion, he had only reached LV6 of the Heaven Ascension realm. Jun Aoyang, on the other hand, had surpassed him and reached LV7 of the Heaven Ascension realm. It would not be a problem for him to reach the Wuzun realm one day. As for the dragons, the old Dragon King was not there. Long Taiji, on the other hand, had made astonishing progress and reached the Wuzun realm. Hualing, and the others had all become Heaven Ascension realm experts. However, Tianyang was puzzled. The old Dragon King, the nine-tailed monster emperor Li Tianshun, and the other experts did not match up with what Yang Tian had said. They had all disappeared. More importantly, Tianyang had sensed that Jiang Shui'er was the only one who had left the Tianshao Great World's barrier in the past year. The old Dragon King and the others had still been in the Tianshao Great World a year ago. How strange. I can't find anyone in the entire continent. Tianyang's primordial spirit power had already enveloped the entire Tianshao Great World. In other words, as long as someone was still there, it was almost impossible to hide from his senses. However, the old Dragon King and the others had not left the Tianshao Great World, but they were not in Tianyang's range of senses either. Tianyang was dumbfounded. The Demon Emperor's calamity had destroyed most of the small worlds and independent spaces in the Tianshao Great World. Even if they wanted to hide, there were no small worlds for them to hide in. The only things that Tianyang could not detect were the few small worlds and independent spaces that had survived. The primordial spirit scan that covered the entire Tianshao Great World could not be compared to a small and accurate scan. After all, this was a world. It's time to go back. Tianyang smiled. Ling Yuhan, who was beside him and reminiscing with Tianyang about the past, also chuckled. His figure flashed. He returned to the soaring cloud sect. He slowly released the aura of a spirit-grade supreme saint. Tianyang's figure appeared. He stood in midair. Hello, everyone. Chapter 1445. My name is Tianyang, Tianyang said with a faint smile. The next moment, the entire Lingyun sect was in an uproar. During the Demon Emperor's calamity, Wang Cheng had sealed himself in a small world at the extreme north of the continent, so he had not witnessed the horror of the Demon Emperor's calamity. Therefore, Tianyang, who had single-handedly destroyed the entire Demon Emperor's calamity and swallowed the entire Blood Sea, did not have much respect for him. However, those who had experienced the Demon Emperor's calamity, such as Yang Tian, were completely different. Looking at his face, which was even younger than 10 years ago, many people's hearts trembled. This kid, he still remembers to come back. Zhou Linger clenched her fists and looked at Tianyang in the sky with a complicated expression. When she saw Ling Yuhan, who was beside Tianyang, her expression dimmed slightly, but it quickly recovered. Flying Sword's face was filled with excitement and admiration, and his gaze seemed to be fixed on Tianyang. When they first met Tianyang, Tianyang was just a little genius who had shown his talent in the Northern Wilderness secret realm and was able to satisfy Flying Sword's recruitment mission. However, after entering Sky Blue College, Tianyang's rise led Flying Sword to rise as well. The current Flying Sword, in terms of strength, was not ranked in the Tianshao Great World. However, in terms of influence in the entire Tianshao Great World's younger generation, other than Zhou Linger, Yi Zhanling, and a few others, no one could be compared to him. This was all because of Tianyang. The entire Lingyun sect was packed with people. Fortunately, those who could enter the Lingyun sect were all cultivators above the Dao Fire realm. One by one, they flew up, so it was not too crowded. Even so, many people were still unable to come. However, some people's concerns were completely erased now. Tianyang used some unknown method to make the scene in the Lingyun sect visible to the entire Tianshao Great World. Many of Tianyang's old friends, such as Jun Aoyang, Long Taiji, Jiang Han, and the others, came to the Lingyun sect. Looking at Tianyang's face, they were filled with excitement. Tianyang, on the other hand, smiled and nodded at these old friends. Then, he exchanged a look with Ling Yuhan. Ling Yuhan and Yun Xinyuan knew what was good for them and disappeared in a flash. Demon Emperor, Tianyang said, a smile. Today, Tianshao Great World's Great Martial Arts Conference. Tianyang smiled faintly. His voice seemed to have a magical power, causing everyone to unconsciously listen to him. Although the three strongest cultivators in the Tianshao Great World, the Old Dragon King, the Nine-Tailed Demon Emperor, and Li Tianshun, who were Wu Zun Realm 9, were not present. However, there were still many people in the Wuzun realm. It was a pity that Tianyang couldn't sense any saint path from them. Then, I'll start from the beginning. The path of cultivation is divided into 6 realms: body refining, bright qi, essence transforming, Tao fire, spirit sea, and heaven ascension. This is the realm before I stepped into the Wuzun realm and made the Wuzun realm known to the world. Tianyang smiled. However, after the explosion of spirit qi, many heaven ascension realm cultivators in the Tianshao Great World directly stepped into the Wuzun realm. Therefore, the cultivation realms in the Tianshao Great World became 7. Tianyang spoke tirelessly. His voice was not loud, but it reached everyone's ears. Some people who had only come to see Tianyang and were not interested in the preaching at all could not help but listen attentively at this moment. It was as if they would lose a great opportunity if they missed it. Countless people in the Tianshao Great World were gradually brought into a strange realm by Tianyang. Tianyang had comprehended the origin of chaos. He could use a little of the power of absolute command to speak. However, do you know what realm is above the Wuzun realm? Tianyang smiled. Hearing this, everyone shook their heads. This was a question that many Wuzun cultivators in the Tianshao Great World had been trying to figure out. However, no matter how they tried to figure it out, it was a mess, and they were even confused. There was not even a trace of clue. If they knew, perhaps the old Dragon King and the others would no longer be in the Wuzun realm. Then, can you guess what realm I am in now? Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Zhou eyes flashed. Is it the realm above the Wuzun realm that you mentioned? Yes, but also no. Tianyang chuckled. To be precise, the Great Saint realm belonged to the Saint realm. However, the leap in power was so great that it was not an issue to say that it was above the Saint realm. I am now above the Wuzun realm, the Great Saint realm above the Saint realm, the spiritual Great Saint realm. You don't need to know too much about this realm. You only need to know one thing. If you want to step into the realm above the Wuzun realm, the first thing you have to do is cultivate Tao. Tianyang said. At this moment, he had officially entered the main topic. Tao is the martial path. Before the Tao fire realm, Tao is only a very general concept. Before reaching the Tao fire realm, you don't need to care about it. After reaching the Tao fire realm, Tao will gradually become more obvious and turn into esoteric meanings. However, it is just a division of Tao. It is the same all the way to the Wuzun realm. Tianyang said loudly. However, if you want to step into the realm above the Wuzun realm, the Saint realm, you have to sublimate Tao again. You have to transform countless esoteric meanings into a clear great path and continue to walk down it. This is what you have to do to step into the Saint realm. Hearing this, countless people in the Wuzun realm were shocked. Their faces were filled with understanding. At the same time, the aura of countless people in the Wuzun realm began to fluctuate. The bottleneck that they had been stuck at for so many years began to loosen. In the other world, some cultivators have already cultivated a clear path in the martial honorable realm. Through this, they have stepped into the sage-to-be realm. Some geniuses can cultivate many great paths. Once they step into the saint realm, their combat strength is unparalleled. If cultivation is compared to filling water, then the cultivator is the bottle, and the cultivation is the water in the bottle. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth is the water vapor of the outside world. Cultivation is to fill the bottle with water, then break it and reshape it into a bigger bottle. The great path is the outline of the bottle, a model that prevents the bottle from distorting. With a clear great path, the great path can be achieved. Wuzun will break through, and the saint realm is within reach. Tianyang said loudly. His voice, along with the power of Tianyang's primordial spirit, spread throughout the entire heaven continent and the entire Tianshao great world. At this moment, dong, a sound like a great bell rang out. In the next moment, flowers fell from the sky and fell into every corner of the Tianshao great world. Countless cultivators felt a flower fall on their heads. It was as if they had been enlightened, and their cultivation improved greatly. And even more cultivators, when they heard the sound of the bell, instantly understood and directly broke through. Seeing this, Countless cultivators above the heaven ascension realm narrowed their eyes. This was flowers fell from the sky, and the heavenly path showed its power. Chapter 1446. Heavenly flowers rained down as the heavenly Tao manifested itself. Seeing this scene, countless powerhouses were dumbfounded and shocked to the extreme. Throughout the hundreds of millions of years of Tianshao Great World's history, there were only a handful of people who could cause such a phenomenon during a sermon. It was only triggered when old antiques who had cultivated for tens of thousands of years were talking about the most basic principles of cultivation. Moreover, the time it took to trigger was extremely short. It disappeared in almost a few seconds. That was because they had already completely grasped the basic cultivation method. However, Tianyang's sermon was a high-level cultivation method that could not be any more high-level. Even so, it still attracted a shower of gorgeous heavenly flowers. Moreover, from what they could sense, it seemed that the entire Tianshao Great World had this phenomenon. Just what level had Tianyang reached? In an instant, countless powerhouses were shocked to the extreme, and their trust in Tianyang also increased tremendously. After that, Tianyang did not continue to delve deeper into the cultivation path above Wuzun's realm. For the cultivators of Tianshao Great World, being too clear about the higher realms was very likely to result in biting off more than one could chew and being unable to progress further. Therefore, Tianyang changed the topic and began to talk about the three most basic levels of essence refinement, chi refinement, and primordial refinement. He tirelessly explained all of his understanding of the Great Tao. The sermon lasted for a total of 3 days and 3 nights. The chaotic heavenly flowers that covered the entire Tianshao Great World also lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. As long as there were cultivators, Tianyang's sermon could be found. Countless cultivators in Tianshao Great World broke through the barrier that had not been shaken for 3 years in the past during these 3 days and 3 nights of sermon. Tianyang's sermon also seemed to have opened up something in countless cultivators, and their talents skyrocketed. Later, there were people who specialized in history in Tianshao Great World who described it. Tianyang preached for 3 days, and the Tianshao Great World was showered with heavenly flowers. The heavenly Tao showed its divinity, and the sound of bells and flowers never stopped. According to incomplete statistics, hundreds of millions of body refinement realm, clear chi realm, and essence transformation realm cultivators had broken through at least 2 realms. The effects of the Tao fire realm were the most obvious. Countless cultivators had gone through 2 Tao fire tribulations at once, and the spirit sea that they had opened had far exceeded their previous estimates. As for the sea of soul realm, the reaching heaven realm, and the Wuzun realm, the effects were just as extraordinary. It could be said that in these 3 days, he had preached the Tao. This allowed the martial arts civilization of the Tianshao Great World to advance by at least 50 years. After 3 days of preaching, Tianyang did not immediately return to the Xiantian Great World. Instead, according to Zhou Tong and the other cultivators from the central region, they had arrived at the central region of the Tianshao Great World. Why did the old Dragon King and the others come to the central region? Tianyang looked in front of him, puzzled. This was the place with the densest spirit qi in the Tianshao Great World. According to the information left behind by the old Dragon King, before he left, the old Dragon King and the others had come here to search for something. And this was one of the few places that Tianyang's primordial spirit could not sense. Tianyang had also confirmed that the other places were small worlds that had been sealed off for countless years. But here, before the catastrophe of the Blood Sea, this was where the ancient shrine had been. After the ancient shrine had been destroyed, this was where the largest statue of Tianyang had been. However, the spirit chi explosion had been centered here, so the statue of Tianyang had been directly destroyed. Tianyang did not think much about the destruction of his statue. So what if it was destroyed? He did not care. However, this was the place where the spirit chi explosion had started, and also the place where the spirit chi of heaven and earth had exploded the most violently. This piqued Tianyang's curiosity. It was easy to make a place rich in spirit chi of heaven and earth. Just like Tianyang had done previously, It could be done by setting up a large formation. However, it was not so easy to make the spirit chi of an entire continent, or even an entire world, so rich that it had reached an explosive state. The spirit chi gathering formation could gather the spirit chi of the surroundings to one place, but what about the world? The surroundings were empty and dark. Where would the spirit chi of heaven and earth come from for it to gather? Therefore, the spirit chi explosion in the Tianshao Great World must have a secret that Tianyang did not know about. I can sense that there are indeed people here. They must be the old Dragon King and the others. Tianyang smiled, then looked at Ling Yuhan. I'll go in and explore. Then, in a flash, he disappeared from Ling Yuhan and Yun Xuanyuan's sight. In the next moment, Tianyang arrived at the underground of the spirit chi explosion. 3 figures appeared in front of him. Who's there? Tianyang did not hide his aura when he teleported. Therefore, the old Dragon King and the other 2 immediately had goosebumps all over their bodies. They turned around and shouted. Li Tianchun was so impatient that he immediately attacked. Wu Zun, peak level 9 state? Not bad. Tianyang casually blocked Li Tianchun's attack and chuckled. Li Tianchun was stunned when he heard that. Why did that voice sound so familiar? In the next moment, the 9-tailed monster emperor's eyes narrowed. Tianyang. Instantly, the old Dragon King and Li Tianchun were shocked. They looked at Tianyang in disbelief. Only after taking a few careful looks from top to bottom did he confirm his guess. It was really Tianyang. When did you come back? The 9-tailed monster emperor was shocked. First, she was shocked that Tianyang had returned. She was shocked because her cultivation had increased to Wu Zun level 9 state. However, she still could not see through Tianyang. A few days ago, Tianyang smiled faintly, then looked around. It was a very ordinary cave. The old Dragon King and the others must have dug it themselves. Tianyang was not interested in it. However, Tianyang was very interested in the thing that the old Dragon King and the others were surrounding. All right, what are you guys doing here? Tianyang asked. The old Dragon King nodded. We are here to study the root cause of the spiritual energy explosion in the Tianshao Great World. Now, we have found the origin. Tianyang was stunned when he heard that. He came in to find out the reason. He did not expect the old Dragon King and the others to have already found it. However, we have no way of touching the origin. That's why we have to stay here. However, for some reason, the spiritual energy here is very rich. There is also a strange power. Our cultivation speed is very fast here. The 9-tailed monster emperor said. In terms of true origin, she was not inferior to Wu Zun in the Xiantian Great World. Tianyang was shocked when he saw that. Then, he walked forward. Wait, Tianyang, you can't go near that thing. If you go near it, you will be seriously injured. The 9-tailed monster emperor panicked when she saw that. Tianyang released his Saint State Sword Dao power and easily penetrated the hole. Then he saw it. Chapter 1447. It was the tip of a sword. Seeing this, Tianyang was stunned. The source of the spiritual energy explosion in Tianshao Great World was the tip of a sword. The tip of the sword was not long, only a little more than a foot long. It was plain white and did not look very sharp. However, it gave Tianyang a strange feeling. The tip of the sword was not placed there on purpose. Instead, it seemed to have been broken into pieces and fell into the depths of Tianshao Great World by accident. That was because the tip of the sword was broken in a very rough manner. It was full of potholes and sharp edges. Tianyang could feel the ferocity of the battle just by looking at the tip of the sword. Why does this white color look so familiar? Tianyang was stunned. At that moment, the 9-tailed monster emperor exclaimed, You can get within 10,000 meters of the tip of the sword? Tianyang was taken aback when he saw this. He turned his head and realized that Li Yunmu was looking at him. The old Dragon King, the 9-tailed monster emperor, and Li Tianchun were standing in different places. However, without exception, they were all 10,000 meters away from the tip of the sword. I don't feel any pressure. Tianyang removed the protection of his Saint Realm Sword Will, raised his hand, and took a few steps forward. He was able to move freely. It was as if there was nothing there. The old Dragon King, the nine-tailed monster emperor, and Li Tianshan were dumbfounded. They had been studying the tip of the sword for more than 2 days. They had been holed up here for almost 2 years. However, other than the fact that the spiritual energy around the tip of the sword was very strong, and that there was a strange force that could improve one's true yuan, as well as the fact that they could not get within 10,000 meters of it, there was no information at all. In the end, Tianyang broke one of the rules that they had concluded as soon as he arrived. He beat them to death. The nine-tailed monster emperor could not believe it. She took a step toward Tianyang. However, before she could take that step, she was sent flying as if she had been hit by a huge force. She slammed hard into the wall of the hole. The nine-tailed monster emperor's internal organs trembled. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Fortunately, the hole they dug was sturdy enough. Otherwise, they would have been buried here with this collision. Why can you go in? The nine-tailed monarch beast had tested it out personally, and it was indeed impossible to get close to the sword tip. However, was there something special about Tianyang that allowed him to enter? Could it be that Saint Realm experts can enter? Tianyang's heart skipped a beat. Then, he called for Ling Yuhan and Yun Xinyuan, who were above him. Come in for a moment. After that, Ling Yuhan and Yun Xinyuan also appeared in the cave, which was almost at the deepest part of Tianshao Great World. Take a look and see if you can come in. At the Heavenly Sun Path, although Ling Yuhan didn't understand what was going on, he still reached out a finger and touched it. A powerful impact came, and Ling Yuhan was almost sent flying like the nine-tailed demon emperor. Fortunately, she immediately used the Nine Nether Freezing Sky incantation. The true origin of an advanced Saint Realm expert burst out and blocked the impact. However, it also proved that they could enter this place. It did not have much to do with whether they were saints or not. What's going on? Tianyang was puzzled. However, he did not pay too much attention to it. There were too many things about him that were different from others. Perhaps something had caused the sword tip to resonate with him. After that, Tianyang came to the side of the sword tip. From afar, the sword tip looked ordinary. There was nothing special about it. However, when he took a closer look, it was still ordinary. It was still ordinary, and there were no changes at all. It was as if it was not the one who released the 10,000-meter barrier. I still feel that this white color is very familiar. Tianyang frowned slightly. Then, he touched the sword tip with his finger. In the next moment, Tianyang's expression changed abruptly. Boom! There was a loud noise. Tianyang instantly realized that he was no longer in the depths of Tianshao Great World. Instead, he was in the middle of a broken continent. What's going on? Tianyang was momentarily stunned. Then, he quickly reacted. He had not been transported anywhere by the sword tip. Instead, he had entered the sword tip's memories. Tianyang could not turn his head or move. He could only move with the sword tip. It was as if the sword tip's original memories were his broken memories. The surrounding continent fragments gradually merged. The torn galaxy was slowly mended. The sword tip where Tianyang was also in the midst of drifting. It was enveloped by the world formed by the continent fragments. From wandering aimlessly in the Milky Way, he gradually entered the Great World. Tianyang's consciousness seemed to have slowed down by a lot. After the sword tip entered the Great World, there did not seem to be any changes. It only went from outside the world to inside the world. Everything else was still drifting in the void. Until one day, terrifying apocalyptic heavenly tribulations descended. Boom, boom, boom. First, it was the divine thunder of destruction. Then, it was the blood demon thunder. Then, it was the 9 destruction golden thunder. There was also a terrifying thunderbolt that Tianyang had never seen before. At this moment, Tianyang's body trembled. He suddenly remembered. This seemed to be the great destruction of civilization. Tianyang's scattered consciousness instantly gathered. At this moment, a white light flashed in the midst of the great destruction of civilization. However, the exploding light dust collided with the tip of the sword. Then, the sword tip seemed to have lost something. It did not continue to wander in the world. Instead, it fell to the ground and instantly escaped into the interior of the world. Then it was dark and dark. 2 years ago, the 3 of them came here. Then, Tianyang walked into this place. Master? Master, what happened to you? At this moment, Tianyong suddenly heard a worried voice. Tianyong instantly woke up. The sword tip's memory was very simple. It wandered, encountered the great destruction of civilization, encountered a white light, and fell into the depths of Tianshao Great World. It was then sealed in dust until the Dragon King and the other two arrived. Although this might have involved hundreds of millions of years, Tianyong did not feel anything at all. However, Tianyong understood one thing. The sword tip seemed to have existed before the birth of Tianshao Great World. Master, Ling Yuhan's voice sounded. Tianyong also woke up from his thoughts. What's wrong? You seem to be stunned for a moment. Ling Yuhan was worried. However, Ling Yuhan clearly caught the change in Tianyong. A moment? Hearing this, Tianyong was stunned. Then, he looked at the sword tip in his hand. Speaking of which, how did you guys come in? Tianyong was puzzled. Wasn't there a 10,000-meter barrier? I don't know. We were able to come in just now. Ling Yuhan shook her head. Tianyong looked at the Dragon King and the other two. They were also baffled. However, this white light is really familiar. Tianyong did not care anymore. He treated it as if he had opened some kind of seal. His attention returned to the sword tip. Then, his pupils shrank slightly. In his spirit sea, his martial soul appeared. Tianshao's sword. This white light was the white light of Tianshao's sword. Tianyong was just about to raise Tianshao's sword to compare when it suddenly flew out of his hand. The sword tip also flew up automatically and merged into Tianshao's sword. What's going on? Tianyong's face changed drastically. In the next moment, a terrifying, mysterious force exploded. Other than Tianyong, the rest were all sent flying. Before Tianyong could speak, the terrifying force of the martial soul turned into a 9-colored Xinguang. It broke the endless seal and soared into the sky.